It's June 1st, 2023. This is Roqe. Welcome to episode 266 of Roqe. I'm jianghomeshi. Hello to you from Toronto. Hello to you from Canada. Salam Dustana Aziz. Durud Bashama. Hope you're doing well. Wherever you are tuning in from around the world, we are on our ongoing mission to build a new audio-visual encyclopedia of Iranian diaspora identity. It's a big show. Big show today, kids. Big show.
Very big show. Excited to hear all these stories.
Well, okay. From me?
No,
from
our
the
guests.
Right, yes. That is smart Pegah here in the studio. Savvy Roham behind the board. Hello, sir. We said hello, sir, at the same time. Go ahead.
We're going to pull our hairs, something.
Pull our hairs?
When you say the same thing at the same time?
What's he talking about?
It's a superstitious thing.
Yeah.
I think it's an Iranian thing, actually,
I guess
where
so.
you pull each other's hair if you say something at the same time. It's like saying jinx. But
Okay.
yeah.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah.
So then what, you say something at the same time, then you have to walk over to the person and pull their hair?
Yeah,
and they pull
to avoid jinxing each other. I don't know.
The Persians, eh? It's so
Yeah,
weird with the
superstitious.
superset of voodoo, you know.
I don't know if I'd say voodoo, but, you know.
The mystical, crazy witch. All right. Joshua Kyan Aalampour. I got Joshua Kyan Aalampour. Let me tell you a little story about this this fella. He is in his early 20s. He is kind of a piano virtuoso. I don't know what else to call him. I mean, you watch him play the piano. He's like the best. He's like I was going to say Glenn Gould, but you probably don't know who that is.
I don't.
A Canadian icon.
Okay.
One of the Gould variations. Okay.
No.
Crickets. How do I work under these conditions, Savvy? Have you ever heard of Glenn Gould?
No.
No. Okay. Of course not.
Richard Kleiderman.
What?
Richard Kleiderman?
I can't understand what he's saying. Is it
It's a name,
Really?
I guess. I don't know who this is, but
Richard Kleiderman? You don't know him?
Richard
Kleiderman?
Kleiderman?
Yeah.
Why does that sound familiar?
He's the most famous piano player in Iran
Oh.
that people know.
But he's not Iranian,
The-
right?
No.
Richard Kleiderman is in Iran.
But in Iran, it's like
What's
it's
he-
like modern talking. You go there and you ask for a piano player, everybody says.
First of all,
Richard
back off the
Kleiderman.
microphone a little bit. You're popping all over the
Yeah.
place. Richard Kleiderman.
Yeah.
All the people who grew up in Iran are like,
Yeah.
Richard Kleiderman. What's it? Why they don't know? No, I've never heard that name before. But now that
Really?
you put him in the same category as modern talking,
Yeah.
you've done him a
I'm
great
thinking
disservice
maybe,
because it obviously means he's a terrible performer that no one in the world is interested in except for Iranians.
I was going to say, you're going to have a preconceived notion right then and there.
Does he sound like modern talking?
No,
Oh,
but
okay.
but he's like pop piano player.
Yeah. Richard Kleiderman.
Okay.
Can we get the last 5 minutes back somehow? Glenn, forget it. Joshua Kyan Aalampour is an amazing piano player. Interestingly enough, he's self-taught.
Wow.
And he is so, and he composes, and he has become this internet sensation, like this, one of those TikTok stars, right? It was millions of views of him playing these little compositions, like a kind of like a vampire, you know. He's got this whole getup. He's got a trench coat and he does these, and he's great. He's amazing. He is of Iranian and Chinese extraction.
Interesting.
And he lives in the States. So he's going to be joining us for a feature interview. You don't seem that interested.
I'm waiting for
Okay.
more. I'm
Why are you
listening.
so silent?
Well, I'm waiting for you to finish telling me all
Why
about
would
him.
I did. I said he's going to be joining us.
Yeah, I said I'm really excited.
I thought you would grunt or say cool, and that's great.
No, I'm actually really excited because I have zero musical talent, but if there was ever an instrument that I would love to play, it would be piano.
You know who's great at piano? Richard
Joshua?
Kleiderman.
I'll look him up.
I feel really bad. Like I feel like, but honestly, music's been my thing for decades. I don't know Richard Kleiderman.
That's shocking.
Unless did he play with someone? Was Richard
No.
Kleiderman a guest player in the Beach Boys for a while or
No,
something?
he was always solo.
He was a solo.
Only piano. That's the thing.
Richard Kleiderman.
Interesting.
You know what?
You're looking him up right now.
I'm
aren't
going to
you?
look him
Yeah.
up right now because I want to know if he's just like a guy who Iranians know, or Kleiderman.
I would love to hear.
Kleiderman.
Whoa.
Richard,
We always say-
C-L-A-Y.
Okay.
Richard Kleiderman.
Kleiderman, okay.
Yeah, he's a French guy. Yeah, I've heard of. Yeah, he's a
See?
French pianist from like
France.
50 years ago. Richard Kleiderman. Oh,
So it's
All right.
Kleiderman.
Kleiderman.
yeah, it's Kleiderman.
Got it,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
What in Iran is
Well, it's-
Kleiderman?
What would it be in French anyway? Richard Kleiderman. I don't know. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, Richard Kleiderman. You don't have the talent of Richard
I do
Kleiderman
not.
or Kleiderman.
I
Yeah.
certainly do not.
Joshua Kyan Aalampour. So he's become this, like I say, this internet
Mm-hmm.
sensation. And what a cool. And he's 22 years old. He's
Wow.
played the Lincoln Center,
At 22.
self-taught. This is what I'm trying to say to you,
Incredible.
and you're not interested.
Well, no, I'm beyond
We're just
interested. I
looking.
was
You're
just
staring
waiting,
off into space. and thinking of Richard
waiting for you to
Kleiderman.
finish here.
All right, so he joins us coming up, first up. And then Shirin Amani Azari. Now, she's been on the show a couple times. We love Shirin. She's an award-winning psychologist located in the UK, but she also has her second book she's just published. In fact, she's about to launch it in Sweden, which is related to the book because the book is about her being a Persian immigrant who grew up in Sweden, and it's a little autobiographical tale of her being 12 years old. A very charming book, and also I think a very a book that a lot of us will relate to as immigrants, certainly Iranian immigrants around the world. It's her story of being 12 years old and the clash of cultures of being thrown into this Western country, in her case, Sweden, and trying to find her way. So the book is called Once Upon a Time in Uppsala. Uppsala is the former capital
Yeah.
of Sweden.
Oh, I
Did you
didn't
know
know
that?
Yeah.
Oh, look at you.
I did not know
Richard
that.
Kleiderman. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might
And
start calling
Uppsala.
you Richard Kleiderman. You knew that. You knew Uppsala was it's like the capital in the 16th
Yeah,
century. It's been a while.
Yeah, I had an old friend in Uppsala,
Oh,
and because of that, I knew
look
Uppsala.
at you.
Very
Actually,
interesting.
Uppsala is it's not that far from Stockholm.
Right.
It's like kind of a suburb of Stockholm. But so Shirin Amani Azari joins us. Then later in the show, after these interviews, I want to talk about academic suppression in Iran. Now, we know, especially during the uprising, during the women life freedom movement over the last 8 or 9 months, we know, of course, professors have been detained, students have been
Yes.
imprisoned, people have been executed, gas attacks, toxic gas attacks on schoolgirls, on schools across Iran. There's a new paper, a new academic paper written by a few people, including the scientist Dr. Nima Taefeshokhr. Sorry, Taefeshokhr.
These last
Easy
names.
for him to say. Dr. Nima Kleiderman.
Easier to pronounce.
Yeah, Dr. Nima Taefeshokhr, and he is he's a scientist. He's a researcher. He's located in Ottawa, Canada. He's going to join us. He's the co-author of this new academic paper talking about academic suppression. So the sum of all of these parts of the crackdown on people who dissent or think critically or anything like that is for there no longer to be, they argue in this paper, I would say, that there is no longer the fundamental right to education that is enshrined in the Universal Charter of Human Rights in the United Nations. Because depending on what gender you are and what you believe, and if you dissent and whatever, you're not going to get the education you should, that you deserve. It's an interesting paper. Dr. Nima Taefeshokhr will join us.
That sounds very interesting, and definitely something we've seen historically with the Islamic Republic cracking down on academics and education and all of that.
And some of it is incredibly sad, but this kind of academic factual analysis of this is important. And you came alive. Now you're all interested.
Well, that was
not for Joshua Kyan Aalampour.
I was
who,
equally
at the age of 22, has played the Lincoln Center. I tell you,
equally excited about that. But you know this
Richard
academic
Kleiderman.
paper.
He played
speaks.
Richard Kleiderman. He was playing Lincoln Center long before. Well, yes. What?
I was going to say that Joshua's story definitely is interesting, but this academic type of paper is right up my alley.
Yes.
So,
What about being an immigrant in Sweden?
That too.
There you go.
Actually, I had read Shirin's other book, Once Upon a Time in Tehran, I believe it's called. And that one really hit home for me because it talks about her, or the character's relationship with her grandmother and her grandmother's story. So that was really
There you go.
very interesting.
Big show.
Yeah.
Big show coming up. It is the beginning of June. Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride to you. Sabi Roham.
You too.
Lots of festivities
Yes.
throughout the month of June. Pride happens in a big way here in Toronto. I think it happens in a lot of places in June, I think.
I think so.
Some-
At least in North America, I think Pride Month is
June.
Yeah.
Also, this weekend, I'm going on a hot date.
Ooh.
Yes.
For your birthday?
No, my birthday is next week.
weekend.
This week I'm going to a concert.
Uh-huh.
Guess which concert I'm going to?
I don't know.
How many Iranian icons are there?
Is Gugush this weekend?
Gugush is this weekend.
Gugush is this weekend.
So I'm going to see Gugush
Wow.
with my mother. I'm taking my mom.
Oh.
That is a very hot date.
Yeah.
It's an incredible date.
My mom is the best.
Exactly.
Who else am I going to take to Gugush?
Great date.
She's coming with me. We're gonna, and of course we know some people who are performing with Gugush. Mahlagha Jaberi, who's a dear friend, former Torontonian in L.A., an amazing cello player. She's been touring with Gugush, and we're going to get her on the show coming up. So
I'm actually sad I'm missing that concert.
why are you missing it?
I'm going to be in Ottawa this weekend. So, well, tomorrow and then the rest of the
Will
weekend.
you be at another concert in
No,
Ottawa?
no.
Perhaps Richard Kleiderman performing? In,
if he's playing, I'll check
what
him
about
out.
Kleiderman? Richard
Maybe.
Kleiderman.
Maybe.
So Gugush, yeah, I'm excited. I'll tell you something. Obviously familiar with Gugush since I was a little kid, even though I was never that immersed in the Persian pop. But how could you not know
Of course.
Gugush? And growing up in a Persian family, never seen her live.
Really?
All these friends, Bob Akamini, all these people who played with her for years. I've never been to a Gugush concert.
You're in for a treat.
I
I've
am.
been
Even
to
my mom's seen her a few times.
Yeah.
But
I've been to a few of her concerts. She's got this incredible stage presence, I think.
Of course. She's one of the only people we have that's one name.
This is true.
Gugush, it's like Cher, Madonna,
Yeah.
Abby, Daryush, Gugush. It's a short list. All right. We're going to get to our guests in a moment and the roundup in just a second. But first, let me tell you about something you should know. This episode of Roqe is brought to you with the support of Blinds Factory. You like blinds, don't you, Pegah?
I do.
You appreciate some good blinds?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, better than the tired old school curtains, blinds are where it's at, and your stop is Blinds Factory. Pegah, these are made in Canada, made in Toronto, in fact, with an Iranian connection. Inventive designs, options that have been carefully considered, trend advisors that curate collections. So Blinds Factory guarantees that you'll find the perfect blind, shape, or drapery to match your style and needs. So you see it, you say you got a window in your house, right? And you say, I want blinds for that. Who do you go to?
I know where to go now.
Where do you go?
Blinds
Factory. That's right. Blinds Factory guarantees that you'll find the perfect blind. Each treatment is crafted to the exact dimensions of your windows, then professionally installed for a perfect fit. Best of all, they are passionate about the details, and that shows in everything they do. Find Blinds Factory at blindsfactory.ca or on Instagram at blindsfactoryca. blindsfactory.ca. Thank you so much for being supporters of this program. We appreciate it. If you're looking for blinds out there or anything like that, and you're in Canada or beyond, I guess.
Yeah.
Probably order them from somewhere else, right?
I guess you can ship blinds, right?
Blindsfactory.ca. All right. I wonder if Richard Kleiderman ever used the
Blinds.
He's probably an amazing guy. He's probably the best interview ever. And now he's not going to come on the show because
we've now made fun of his
why?
name.
And I didn't know he was. Except I knew maybe Kleiderman. But yeah. All right, let's get to the Roqe Roundup, and let's get into it here. What do you have for us, Pegah?
Couple of interesting things. I want to start off with news of South Korea potentially releasing funds to the Islamic Republic. Have you heard of this?
So what does that mean?
So there's been talks with between Seoul and Washington, actually, in regards to releasing about $7 billion worth of frozen assets or funds to the Islamic Republic, because these are funds that I guess they owe to Iran because of the imports of oil prior to the imposition of the U.S. sanctions back in May 2019. So now they're sitting at the table, so to speak, and having these conversations to try to re-strengthen ties and to allow for the release of these funds. Now, there's been a lot of commentary on this.
Wait, sorry, is this not a weird time to be releasing funds back to the Islamic Republic?
Absolutely, and that's part of, I think, some of the pushback that South Korea has been receiving, and not only South Korea, the United States as well, because let's not forget that they're also a vital player in this actually taking place. Now, like anything else, there's two sides to this. There's some argument about, if the funds are released, they're not going to be directly given to the Islamic Republic because they're going to be allocated for specific things. So, for example, they would be used to pay UN dues, purchase humanitarian equipment, so things like vaccines, go towards humanitarian needs, things like that. That's the one side. The other side, exactly what you said, considering what's been happening in Iran the last 8-9 months, the atrocities, this regime being the way they are, why now?
Who's arguing the first side?
Well,
the regime.
South Korea, the U.S., and the regime,
but
of course.
South Korea is somehow now helping overtly? Why? I don't get it.
Well, actually, it's surprising, and I didn't know this, but South Korea was one of Iran's biggest crude oil buyers in Asia. So that's why this is such a big number and such a big deal. Now, the other thing is that this is also the reason I was saying that, let's not forget the U.S. involvement here, is that there's also talks between South Korea and the U.S. and the support from Seoul for Joe Biden's 2024 U.S. presidential election. So this whole thing...
The South Koreans are on Team Biden?
Apparently.
Weird.
Apparently they are. So, it's just the timing of this.
Like overtly?
Overtly, it seems, yeah.
All right.
And also, again, going back to timing, there's been all this conversation about the release of hostages, hostages with dual citizenship, things like that. So all of it is just very, very suspicious.
All right. Yeah, that's somewhat shocking, actually.
Very shocking.
3 months ago, South Korea would be crucified by the international community for doing something like this. This is a testament to how international outrage for now seems to have died down. That countries can get away with releasing billions of dollars to the Islamic
Republic. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what else have you got?
Next, I want to talk about two. Well, one is a video and one's more of an image that's gone viral. So the first one is there was an image of an Iranian model at Cannes, the film festival, and her dress made a lot of noise. So this is an Iranian-born model by the name of Mahlagha Jaberi. I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, but
very famous model, right?
Mahlagha. See, I knew I'd get that wrong.
Very popular person.
Yeah.
So she wore a dress at one of the, I guess, opening festivals at Cannes, and her dress was really, really interesting. It was actually designed by an Iranian designer, an Iranian fashion designer by the name of Gila Saver. And so her dress was this black gown, but where her neck, I guess or the neckline, was in the shape of a noose.
Yes.
And on the back of her dress, she had a statement written, "Stop executions." And so she wore this dress to really call attention to the wrongful executions that have been recently carried out by the Islamic Republic. But there have been so many different messages that we've heard in regards to her dress and so many
polarized
different opinions.
Reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was really taken aback by the fact that, there were people who were saying that, why is she wearing this dress? For me, it was almost like, well, why not? She's got this platform. She's wearing this dress. She's using, she's taking an opportunity to bring attention to this. Why not? But there's been a lot of comments saying that, it was in bad taste, that she was glamorizing executions.
It's disrespectful somehow to those who've been executed or who are terrorized in Iran. You're on a glamorous red carpet. But I as well my tendency would be to applaud her, to say, you know, here's someone. I mean, this is the kind of the problem with, I was going to say our community, but it's sort of the problem with social media. It's like nobody can do anything right.
Exactly.
And so here's a person taking an opportunity to make her red carpet appearance in a high-profile film festival event, to use that opportunity to actually say something or try and say something, and she gets attacked for it as opposed to just doing nothing. And I mean, it certainly made, you know, it makes a statement. It's got people talking about it. So I guess in that sense, it's been effective. There is a macabre kind of, you know, weird twist to somebody who's on a glamorous red carpet, you know, at the height of elite gathering, you know, throwing a bone to people who are on death row in Iran. But that's the nature of the world, right?
Yeah, but I mean, if you look back a couple months ago, we were saying, why aren't people using their platforms to bring awareness to the issues in Iran? Why aren't we, you know, individuals who are high profile?
But if to be fair to those who've been critical of it, it isn't, why did you say something? I mean, Nicola Ansari put "Women Life Freedom" on her chest, you know, and nobody said that was a bad thing to do. It was the nature of the design that, you know, is putting a noose. But I think it's a good thing. I mean, I think it's an important one that it was done. I think it's where are you at, Sabi Roham?
I'm not on the category of attacking her per se, but to me that was so good designed that it's like it's too glamorous to me, so I didn't like it in that sense. If she just put a noose on her neck, or like Nicole just wrote something with hand, I think that was more.
Oh, that's interesting.
More useful, I guess. And then she could talk about it. Like Nicole was saying that every single person that asked me why you did that, I told them why and educate them. I think education is better than just showing.
To be fair, on the back of her dress, she also had it embroidered, and it had said "Stop Executions." And so I think that, along with this image of the noose around her neck, definitely sparked conversation. And I mean, I don't know, we haven't heard reports of this or anything, but I would imagine that if anyone asked her if this was her intent, that she'd have those conversations.
I hope she'll come on the show.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk to her about it.
But one other thing I wanted to mention is that, you know, this is particularly important to do this at Cannes, because like we talked about, I think it was last week, you know, any sort of political statement or any awareness brought on humanitarian crises or anything like that is strongly frowned upon at Cannes. So for her to do this is actually making an even bigger statement.
Yeah. Okay. Curious to hear what people think of this. I mean, send us your notes, send us your letters. info@rookmedia.com. I'll read something if you have something very, if you're passionate one way or another about the noose dress that was used at Cannes. What else you got?
Next thing is a viral video. This one I think a lot of people have seen, and I've definitely seen a lot of response to it. And this was the video of the Ukrainian athlete who refused to
shaking the hand of the
Iranian athlete. Yeah. So this was at the World Bench Press Championships in South Africa. There were 3 individuals who were on the podium, but one was a Ukrainian powerlifter and one was an Iranian powerlifter. And the Ukrainian won first place. And so, you know, they're standing up on the podium, and this Iranian powerlifter by the name of Amirzam Mesfurush, he goes to shake the hand of the Ukrainian athlete. And he turns around and doesn't give him his hand. And so the Iranian athlete attempts again. So for a second time. And again, the Ukrainian athlete just, you know, turns his shoulders the other way and ignores him. And then you can actually visibly see in the video, the Iranian athlete kind of shrugs. And as, you know, you can see this confusion on his face, and he's thinking, what's going on? So there's been a lot.
And then you know what happens?
What happens next?
You know, really?
No, I don't.
You don't know? If you watch the full video, then the Ukrainian guy leaves the podium. The Iranian athlete says something rude. Like,
really?
As the guy's leaving, says, like, I'll shit on you or something like that.
No
and to which the handler looks at the Iranian guy and he says, you wouldn't shake my hand. He says this in Persian. You can hear it,
Oh, wow. I didn't see that part. I guess I saw a condensed clip.
Yes. But, yeah.
Interesting.
So the reaction to this has been interesting, hasn't it?
It has been. There's so many varying comments, I guess. There's individuals who are saying, you know, this is blatant racism, and how could this Ukrainian powerlifter not shake the hand of the Iranian athlete?
At first glance, it's galling. It's like, what, you know, you're on the you're on the podium. You're not going to shake the guy's hand. But then you go, okay, what's actually going on here, and what's the geopolitics of this? I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So some people are saying, you know, this is actually a great move by the Ukrainian athlete because it's making people look into it a little bit more and see that, you know, Iran is supporting Russia, and with the war between Ukraine and Russia, that's why he decided to do this, to bring awareness, and doesn't want to shake the hand of someone who's complicit in that and all of that. That's one side of things. The other side of things is that, you know, this is blatant racism. There's no sportsmanship, and within sports and things like that, there shouldn't be any place for this kind of thing, and there has to be a distinction between the athletes and the government.
But there's a third side. There's a third side that applauds the Ukrainian for not shaking the hand of the Iranian, because the Iranian athlete is a representative of the Islamic Republic.
That's exactly
That's the Mahlagha position, right?
Yeah, and so that's what I was actually going to say, is that there's been a couple of people who are bigger names out there who have kind of given their opinion on this. So Chelsea Hart, who's been, you know, a big advocate for everything that's been going on, the comedian in Iran the last couple of months, she came out and posted on Twitter and, you know, referred to this as racism, and was saying that, you know, how could the Ukrainian athlete do this?
Do better.
Do better, exactly. And then I didn't know, but you mentioned Masih Alinejad. I guess she was also in the camp of, you know, it's good that he didn't, because the athlete represents...
she was supportive of the Ukrainian athlete not shaking the hand of the Iranian athlete. So there's definitely it's interesting that the further we get into this period of this uprising, you know, everything's disputed, right? Like
exactly.
look at the things we're talking about, whether it's the dress on the Cannes red carpet, or this video of the two athletes. I mean, there's this wide spectrum of opinion, which isn't wrong necessarily. It's good to have different opinions, but there really doesn't seem to be any unity of thought around any of this stuff. What did you think of that, the Ukrainian athlete not shaking the Iranian athlete's hand?
I'm in the middle with all this. I think he could shake hand and probably say something in support of Iranian people. So maybe that was the best move to do. Yeah.
The thing that I'm not convinced that the Ukrainian athlete, all due respect to the winning Ukrainian athlete, clearly a great bench presser or whatever, powerlifter. But I'm not convinced that he has this grand political plan that, you know, I'm doing this because of the, you know, students at Sharif University who were attacked by the Basij. And, you know, I mean, I think he's like, oh, the Iranians are bad guys or something like that. Yeah. And coming on the heels of, I mean, you were sitting here a week ago saying Zelensky made a statement that you found offensive because he was equating the people of Iran with the regime. So you put all that in together and you kind of go, what's going on with our Ukrainian brothers and sisters who we were supporting? You know, I see that, you know, how we would take umbrage at the handshake not happening.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I mean, we don't even know this. I don't know the athlete well enough. If this Iranian athlete is a staunchly pro Khamenei, you know, athlete who runs around with a photo of the supreme leader on his chest, then, you know, yeah, maybe we wouldn't be as excited about his, you know, shaking hands with the guy, right?
Actually, what I wanted to mention is, for me, when I first saw this video, it wasn't so much about these individual athletes. It was just a collective. Going back to what happened last week with Zelensky's speech and the conversations that we had about that, it saddened me again because, you know, 6-7 months ago when we were out on the streets protesting and when social media was blowing up with images of support and all that for Iranians in Iran fighting this current revolution, there was so much love between Iranians and Ukrainians because they felt so connected, given that they were both experiencing, you know, all these atrocities.
I still think there is. I just think it's sad that this is 2 weeks in a row now that we're talking about some tension between Iranians. I
think the shift is a little bit sad, that's for sure.
Anything else in the roundup?
That's it for the roundup, but, you know, there is an event I want to talk about really quickly. There's a contemporary Iranian art exhibition happening in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
It's going to take place June 3rd through to the 6th. It's happening at Free Market Gallery, and the name of the exhibition is De l'Envers.
Nice.
The exhibition is going to be dedicated to the brave women and men leading the Women Life Freedom Revolution in Iran and will benefit the End Gender Apartheid campaign. So for anyone in Atlanta
or going to Atlanta, here's a reason.
Check it out.
June 3rd till 6th. Why aren't these events that you talk about part of the roundup?
I mean, I guess they are.
Well, why did you say that's the end of the roundup? Now I'm going to say an event.
I don't know. The roundup to me is so like news central.
Well, this is news. You're talking about an Arctic. So
I guess.
Yeah.
Part of the roundup.
Well, because then we're going to have a separate section. It's like, all right, we're done with the roundup. Now let's go to the events section.
Roundup including events. We'll do
I
that.
think the roundup can include. I think the event could just be part of the roundup.
Done.
Anything else, Pegah? Yeah, there's an event. See, Richard Kleiderman never had these issues.
He would have never done this.
He never had these issues. It was all
That's
roundup
right.
for him. And never has these issues. I think he's still around.
Poor guy.
I have to Google him again.
We've now made fun of his name
Hang on a
and killed
second.
him off.
No, he's fine. He's
Thank
not even.
God.
He's 69 years old. Richard Kleiderman.
Is he coming to Toronto?
Ballade pour Adeline is one of his. Oh my God!
He's coming?
No, hang on a second. What is the first thing that comes up on Google when you correctly, not Kleiderman, but put Richard Kleiderman in? It's why did Richard Kleiderman change his name?
Oh,
Ooh, what was his name?
Let me look at this.
Maybe it was Kleiderman.
No, he's Iranian.
Philippe Paget. Philippe Paget's name was changed to Richard Kleiderman.
What?
This is amazing. After half an hour of talking about this
Oh
guy,
my gosh.
was changed to Richard Kleiderman. He adopted his great grandmother's last name to avoid mispronunciation of his real name outside of France, which didn't help with the
didn't help,
audience who
yeah.
call him Kleiderman.
Oh my God. That is.
So he's actually Philippe Paget.
But
He thought Paget would be hard to pronounce.
He has sold an astonishing 22 million copies. Now, his main thing is Ballade pour Adeline, but he also, the second thing that comes up, by the way, I got like guests waiting to come on this show that we booked for weeks. The second thing that comes up is Richard Kleiderman a good pianist? I'm not kidding. This is what comes up on Google. So let me click on that. He is popular in Asia.
Oh.
Interesting.
Mostly, and is noted by the Guinness Book of World Records as being the most successful pianist in the world.
There you go.
Richard Kleiderman. Do you want more? Does Richard Kleiderman have a wife?
So Joshua has a way to get to Richard Kleiderman.
I don't know if I would call Richard Kleiderman the great. I mean, Rachmaninoff, like when we dismissing, I don't know. Is Richard Kleiderman really the greatest
I
pianist?
think he sold more copies than anyone,
so have
right?
Modern Talking. That's
Right.
my
Honestly, the only thing that right now is still blowing my mind is the fact that this person changed his name and we
Yes.
were actually mispronouncing
Yes,
his name.
well,
and all that.
I would never
Hilarious.
do this to Pierre Paget.
Of course.
I'm only Philippe Paget. Sorry, what was his name? I think it was Philippe. I would never.
Something Paget.
I
You
would
already did.
never disrespect Philippe Paget. But Richard Kleiderman / Kleiderman.
Whole other story.
Whole other story. We're coming to you on rookmedia.com. It's there that you can link to all of our platforms. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Instagram, CastBox. If you'd like to see some visuals with Rook, switch over to YouTube right now. You can watch the full interviews with Satine, Bijan Motazavi, Dr. K, Maziar Falahi, some of the guests we've had in studio recently. You can watch them all in color, video on YouTube right now. And if you like your YouTube descriptions and bulletins in English and Persian, check us out on Telegram, where Savvy Roham does the translations into Persian. Mm-hmm. So if there's any issues you have with them, if the translations are wrong,
You can blame him.
you know where to go. And you can become a supporter of Rook, a Rook member, which we really appreciate, by going to our website, rookmedia.com. It's very simple, rookmedia.com. Just press the Support Us button. It leads you to our Patreon page, where you can become a Rook member at the bronze, silver, or gold level. It's a few dollars a month, and it really helps us do what we do. If you're a regular listener or viewer or consumer of our Rook content, we would love you to become a Rook member. Or if you're irregular, but you want to be part of things, we really appreciate it. Thank you to Amy or Ami Madoni, who has just become a patron at the bronze level. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Ami Madoni. Thank you, Pegah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roham. Do we have our
sir.
first guest?
Yep.
We do. All right. My
Let's go.
feature guest today. First guest is an American pianist with an Iranian father and a Chinese mother. Joshua Kyan Aalampour is a talented self-taught classical composer, an internet star, followed by hundreds of thousands of people around the world on his social media platforms. Take a listen to this. There you go. A taste of Raindrop Waltz number 1 in B minor, and the talented fingers of our guest today, Joshua Kyan Aalampour. By the way, that's a piece that has over 2.6 million streams on Spotify alone, and it's a piece that he composed himself. Joshua was born in New Jersey. His family moved to Jinan, China when he was 10 years old. He taught himself to play the piano with a cheap 61-key keyboard and online piano lessons on YouTube. And a few years later, Joshua ended up at UC Berkeley as a music student. That is, of course, one of the most prestigious schools in the United States. These days, Joshua is focusing on expanding his compositions to film scores while he teaches music to students from different parts of the globe and plays gigs at little unheard of concert halls like the Lincoln Center, despite being only 22 years old. Oh, and he's also amassed about 900,000 followers on TikTok alone, let alone his other social media platforms. Right now, Joshua Kyan Aalampour joins me from New York. Hello, sir.
Hello. Wow, thank you for the introduction. That's very kind. It's a pleasure.
I mean, I don't even know where to start with you. First of all, you're 22 years old now. How does it feel to be really old?
It feels kind of weird. I mean, nothing really has changed much about my personality. It's just that I have more bills now and slightly more responsibilities, but it's nice. I like the freedom.
What kind of freedom do you have now?
Well, just in my own apartment, and I get to go grocery shopping.
Right.
I love Costco. Like, it's just so much fun. Just like it's so yeah, that's something like, adult stuff that I've never really delved in
Right.
before.
But you can't be the child prodigy anymore. Once you become an adult, people will have more expectations of you.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
I love that piece that we just played. And that is not just you playing, but that's something you composed. When did you write that?
I wrote that, I want to say 2019. Some classical composers like Chopin, they would publish like a set of etudes or a set of certain type of works, and it would be like one for each key. And there's 24 different keys. And I loved rainy weather, and I just started composing waltz after waltz for whenever it rained. And thankfully, like, it was New Jersey, so it rained quite a bit at some times. And I ended up composing 24 different raindrop waltzes, one for each key. I never ended up publishing all 24. I only published this one because I was very self-conscious, and it was like my earlier work, which, when you're an artist, right? When you look back at your earlier stuff, you kind of cringe a little bit. Like, I can't believe I did that. But this is one of the few where I was like, I actually kind of like this one, so I'm going to publish this one. So it was originally a set of 24 short piano waltzes dedicated to the rain.
I love that your earlier work is from when you were a teenager 2 years ago. Your early period that you've now graduated from. The thing is that you're extremely prolific as a writer. Like, you have this thing where you regularly, I don't know if you're still doing it every day, but you regularly post something new that you've written on TikTok, right? Like, you do these little compositions. Is that because composing becomes very easily to you, or is it something that you really work at and you slavishly want to put out something that you write with regularity?
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's cool that you mentioned that. I'm really impressed. You really did your research. But yeah, I do compose a lot. I don't post everything that I compose, so on average, maybe like 3 to 4 things a day. I don't really find myself like forcing myself to like churn something out for social media. The only times I really feel like that is if I have like a homework assignment due or something like that. Then it's like, okay, you really got to write this. Um, but yeah, I think that for the most part, it's just like I'm just hearing stuff. My compositional method is kind of weird. I usually don't really compose at the piano or
Mm.
at my desk when I have like software open. It's more so like if I'm like walking to class or if I'm cooking or something, I'll hear something in my head and I'll rearrange the parts in my head. And so when I'm at the piano or I'm at my computer, right, with like software and all the virtual instruments there, it's more so I'm just dictating what already organized.
You retain it in your head, or do you have a little recorder that you sing it into or something, or is this just like in your head?
A lot of it is in my head, but sometimes I look like even when I'm scrolling down social media, I'll just like go through like a random piece like 4 months ago. I have no recollection. Like, oh, I can't believe I did that. So sometimes I do have like some videos on my phone where, and I can't sing, but just me like humming like motives and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's like retained. I would say.
Might seem like a strange question to most people listening, but I think musicians, especially those who write songs, would understand it, which is that if you write something that you really like, don't you feel like you don't want to give it give it away on TikTok right away? I mean, are there things that you write that you sort of retain and go, no, that's going to be for this album that I'm going to put out and debut at the Lincoln Center or something? Or do you just are you this open with your material that you just want to share?
That's a good question. I do have some works that I've completed like a while ago, and I still haven't published them because I want it to be part of a larger set. So I do have some that are like that, but um what I found really satisfying, and this is how I got into like film scores, is like the obsession generally with like a lot of film scores, the obsession with like leitmotifs. So if you're watching like Pirates of the Caribbean or something like that, right? It's like Davy Jones's theme, right? And like anytime Davy Jones is like there or has something to do with him, right? You kind of hear like sprinkles of like his motive or like the harmonic progression to that, right? And I thought that was really cool. And then I'm trying to do this thing over the course of my life. So like leitmotifs, they usually develop over the course of a film, right? Depending on what happens throughout the story,
Explain what a
um,
leitmotif is for people listening.
sure, a leitmotif is like it's like a motive or a short melody that's associated with a character or place, and it recurs throughout the film, right? So like Darth Vader is like bum 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 bum, but and it was interesting. I was rewatching some of the Star Wars stuff, and then I never really paid attention to score. Obviously, the score is very iconic, but then you start to notice that little motive is like snuck in all these different places whenever something has to do remotely with Darth Vader, and
Sure.
so I like that idea, and I thought to myself, well, everyone's life is like their own personal, it's their own personal movie, and so what I wanted to do was have my own leitmotifs, motives that are associated with me, and have them develop over the course of my lifetime. So it's a long answer to your rather simple question, which I apologize, but
I love what you're saying. I mean that, and by the way, those film scores, the greatest film scores in my mind are the ones that have an iconic leitmotif that you associate with a character, or so that you like. Laura's theme in Doctor Zhivago, Maurice Jarre, da da ba 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 ba, or there's that Lawrence of Arabia. They're sort of similar. He wrote both of them, but that thing every time he's thinking about Laura, you hear that song and and it becomes this audio cue for remembering the film for the rest of your life. And you're right, you can write those if you have the ability like you do. It's like wearing a favorite shirt. You can write your own leitmotif that you will live by, right?
yeah, so I have a couple of things. That's why I'm kind of open with putting stuff out a lot, is because I think it's satisfying when you look back at some of my older works, you could find themes that I still use to this day. At least I find that satisfying with other composers when I realize, oh wow, like Beethoven's Fifth is also found in his Appassionata Sonata in the Coda. It's like I recognize that he's been obsessing over this theme for a while. So
When do you know if you've found your iconic riff or your one piece that represents you?
that's a good question. It took me some time. I don't have like one. I have a couple, and I was writing a lot of music, and I still write a lot of music. Like in my like earlier days, I was writing a lot, and I do cringe at a lot of my earlier stuff, but some of the stuff that I don't cringe, I'm like, that survives for a reason. I like that for a reason. And so it's those motives that kind of survives, where I could look back on it and I could be like, I still like the way that sounds. Those are the ones usually that I keep, and I extrapolate some of that material and then use it for future compositions.
Okay, so let me bring the audience in on something, because everything about you so far that we've heard would be impressive enough. You're 21 years old, you write this stuff, it's on Spotify, you compose, you play, etc. But one would then assume that you've started doing this stuff. You're like Wayne Gretzky, who was on the ice at the age of 3 or something. You know, you're Lionel Messi, who's kicking a ball when he's a baby. And so we would just assume, okay, you had a piano when you were 2 years old, and that's all you've done for 21 years. And that's how you became who you are. The story is, and I say this with some incredulity because I can't believe this is actually the truth. The story is that you actually started playing piano when you were 16. Is that true?
Yeah, it was October 10, 2017. So I was 16 years old. That's when I started.
So all of this, I mean, you played the fucking Lincoln Center. This has all happened in 5 years.
Well, yeah, Lincoln Center was early. That was like in 2019-ish, something like that. But
all right, that was after 2 years. So, so tell us the story of. I mean, look, you're obviously some kind of genius, but no. Well, I mean, who can do this? So how did the piano thing? How did you discover that the piano and then music was something that you have this kind of facility for?
Well, I'd say my introduction was a little unorthodox. So I wasn't really a musical child. I wanted to, like, at some point I wanted to like build roller coasters, and I wanted to be a doctor. Then I realized, I like faint at blood, so I can't do that. And then actually at one point I wanted to be a boxer, like a fighter. And then I sparred once, and the guy jabbed me once. I just quit. I'm like, it's not for me. So, but it was so. I was born in New Jersey, but my parents were entrepreneurs for a little bit, and so we lived in China. And in China, it's very common to see, people from a very young age, just very, very talented musicians. Like it's like Moonlight Sonata, for example, the third movement, which is it's a pretty difficult, very popular classical piece. That's just like a bass line for everyone. And if you don't play the piano, then you must play the violin or something else. It's like everyone plays something.
By the way, we had a classical pianist, an incredible woman named Shaqaiqa Nosrati, who toured China on a concert tour, and she's German, Iranian background as well, like you, and she said the most interesting thing about the crowds in China was that there were young people there to see a classical concert of her playing the piano. It was like a Coldplay concert or something that you were. I mean, not Coldplay at this point. But some, I don't know who's a Doja Cat concert or something like that. But there's like a bunch of teenagers, because piano and classical music is still considered in vogue for younger people, right? Would that be true in China?
I would say so. Yeah, many Chinese kids, they learn from a very young age, and it's a part of their routine usually. But yeah, it originally started because my dad always loved Javad Marafi, the Iranian composer. Golden Dreams, that's his favorite piece. Wanted to learn how to play the piano. He told me stories in the past, when he was younger, he wanted to learn, but his family couldn't afford. So he was like, you know what, I want to start doing it. So he bought like this keyboard, right? And it was about 100 RMB, so 100 yuan, that's about $16-ish.
Hang on a second. Are you in China still at this point, or do you?
Still in China.
You're in China. So let me just set the stage here. You're a kid born in America with a Persian dad and a Chinese mom. And moved to China when you're around 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
Can I just backtrack a little, and can you just tell us a little bit about, first of all, that's different. I mean, that can be very jarring for a kid to suddenly move to the other side of the world and a completely different language, culture, etc. How was the transition for you?
It was it was interesting. So yeah, we moved. My dad was a pharmacist, and he built up an independent pharmacy very successfully, and then he sold it for a couple $1 million. And this was in New Jersey. And then he flew to California to learn how to make pizza, like Italian pizza from this Italian guy. And it's VPN, which I know we think now it is like the internet security thing, but it's also Vera Pizza Napolitano. So he went there for a little bit, learned how to make brick oven pizza from this guy, and then flew back. And the next week we were on the plane to China. So it was when I was in the 4th grade. And it's because
your family is, there needs to be documentaries made about forget your dad. I mean, this okay, keep going.
Yeah, well, it was just because he had like this dream of he loved cooking, he loved culinary arts.
And how long ago did he come from Iran? Like, is he quite Iranian, or
he left Iran when he was 16,
okay.
And then he stayed in Germany for a little bit, and then came to the US.
Okay.
Yeah, so he wanted to open an Italian restaurant franchise. Then and my mom's Chinese, and they said that okay, well, let's go through with this idea. We have the capital, but there's too many good Italian places in the US. There's too much competition. Let's go to China. And so we went there. And
because that makes sense. Let's move to, I mean, I guess with your mom, maybe that's but that seemed like a stretch. I mean, okay, let's go. What about Canada or somewhere closer by? No, let's go start the pizza business in China. Yeah.
It was very different, and like very interesting, totally different things. Like, just like the way they do some things. So, like, for example, we had to like import an oven. Our oven was like Sergliano Forni, which was directly imported from Italy. And they held it at customs, and we're like, oh no, what do we do? And my mom's like, you got to show up with like 12 iPads and take them all to dinner. I'm like, why? It's like, you got to bribe them. Like, that's the way things are done. I'm like, oh, okay. So we showed up with like 12, like at the time it was like the first generation iPad, which was like new at the time. Mm-hmm. And then boom, our oven came in like the next week. We had our oven, and it was like the same thing for all the other equipment.
Oh, okay.
Very, very different, things.
Sorry, who were you giving the iPads to? Some customs official or something?
Yeah, just the customs officers. We had to do that for a bunch of different equipment. It was very, very different. I attended public school there. There was no international school. I don't know if there is now, but back then,
do you speak Mandarin, or do you? I mean, now you do probably, but when you were 10 years old, did you?
Not really. No, I'm fluent in it now. Like, I can read and write, and I can speak some like Chinese slang.
Wow. But, what about Persian? Can you speak Persian?
No, I wish I could. The only Persian words I know are like salam, chila kebab, juja kebab, sohan, sangak. I'm a very hungry.
That's right. That's the important things. The important. So were you upset at your parents that at the age of 10? I mean, you probably have friends and you have a whole life built in Jersey, and they're like, okay, we're going to go to China. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I was upset, but I will say holistically, the whole China experience, I'm very, very grateful for that, because it taught me a lot of life lessons I feel like money can't buy. So it taught me, the value of money. I don't take any of this for granted. I have a roof over my head. I have heat. I can feed myself. Those are, I'm grateful for all that, because there have been many moments where, you had to sleep hungry, or you had nothing, you had nothing to your name. So I'm very grateful for everything that went on there. But certainly in the short term, I was very frustrated. I was like, why do I have to say bye to my friends? Very short notice.
Right. Well, I'm going to bring you back to the being 16 years old and the little keyboard. But at this point, when you were, in your early teens, say, and living in China, were you a particularly creative kid? I mean, would it have been obvious that you're going to be somebody who's going to be composing things and playing music?
I'm gonna be honest. I don't think so. I mean, I'm pretty crap at drawing, and I've tried it so many times because I love art, and like every single time I try, it's just like it looks like a second grader did it. But no, I don't think so. I wasn't a musical kid. I didn't really do anything super creative. When I was like 13, 14 and stuff, I had a lot of like, I was very upset at like what happened. So I was just working out a lot. and that's why I wanted to be a boxer at that
Okay.
time.
Josh, you're intensely smart. So I would assume that you would do well at school. Like you were probably very successful at whatever you were doing, right? Except for the boxing.
Yeah, well, thank you, thank you. I was it was I was always a good student, even from like elementary school. I was a good student, but my education history was kind of interrupted by all this moving. So I didn't finish the fourth grade. I never attended the fifth or the sixth.
Right.
I attended the seventh grade in China, public schools. And I wasn't fluent at the time and I could like make conversation, but when you're reading like Chinese literature as an American, like reading like Shakespeare, like even Americans struggle with that, right? It was very difficult. And so, I would always fail like Chinese class and stuff like that. I would be the best in English class. Sometimes I even teach the class because it's very easy teaching English class in China. And then I attended a little bit of the eighth grade, then I dropped out. And then ninth grade, because we moved back to the US August 2016. And we stayed there for a little bit, August 2016 to February 17, 2017. We lived in Texas for a little bit. And I started ninth grade there. I was doing great. It was, even though, well, I can say it now because it doesn't matter, but we forged all my like transcripts and everything because like I had no history. So
by the way, what happened to the pizza business in China? Is that still going, or is are there franchises all over China? I mean, I don't know. I want to know the end of the story. What?
So at the end of it, it didn't work out.
Okay.
We had at some points it was doing well. We started in like 2011, and then by like late 2016ish, it was just like, okay, we can't do it anymore. And there's a couple of things we didn't take into account. The Chinese taste palette is totally different. Like if you go to a Starbucks in China, right, you're gonna see like red bean cake. You don't see that in the US.
Sorry, I don't mean to.
No, you're good. You're good.
But this wasn't something your parents thought about before the idea of the pizza chain in China. I mean,
no, we didn't. But I will say though, like if we had opened in like, and I know I sound biased because like I'm their son,
sure,
but like if we would have opened in like someplace in Italy, it was like everything was imported. So the margins were like razor thin. Like the steak was from Australia. The tomato, San Marzano tomato, everything was Italy, right? It was just like it would have been amazing if it was
pizza was sublime. The
pizza,
audience,
steak, everything.
The audience for the pizza, not so much.
Yeah, no, we would shred Parmesan, and they're not used to that. They're just like, why is there fingernails in my pasta? Like, this is not fingernails, this is Parmesan. And very different. They add sugar to like pasta. They eat pasta with ketchup. Like that's something that doesn't. It's very.
This is where you learn to grate the cheese for your fettuccine alfredo that I've seen you make.
Oh God, that's funny that you know that video. But yeah, so it didn't. There were some points we were doing good. It would really fluctuate. We would do like 50, 60K a day, but like the margins were razor thin. And we opened the second location, but also, so obviously there's that fault, but there was like some unorthodox like corruption that we couldn't really take into account. So like everything's biased towards foreigners. We had some investors and they weren't really playing by the game.
Just out of curiosity, did China ever feel like home to you? I mean,
that's a weird thing. Yeah,
for a few years, or did you always feel like you were squatting and you're eventually gonna? I mean, you, regardless of your family, would have to come back to the West or the United States or something.
That's a really that's a good question, because like in the beginning, obviously everyone's homesick because I'm gonna say I was a pretty spoiled. I would say I was kind of a spoiled kid when I was younger. We lived in like this big mansion, cars and everything, and very successful thing, like really big chandelier, just like all these things, right? Really big American dream fulfilled, right? And then now we're living, I didn't even know, and this is gonna sound really stupid, I didn't know apartments were a thing. I thought everyone had a big house because we lived in the rich neighborhood, and we had, all of a sudden we're living in like a tiny apartment. And it's a tiny apartment, and in one of the rooms doesn't even have heat in the winter, so we called that the freezer. And that's where we put my mom and my younger brother. We're like, yeah, you guys go there whenever they annoy us. No, I'm kidding. But like yeah, it was very, it was not used to it. After some time, and I always like, we would fantasize, and the thing is, when you're really homesick for a long time, you start fantasizing about the place you originally were. Right. And then sometime in like 2012 or something, our original mansion got flooded and it was like destroyed. So I don't know, something happened. The bank took it. So it was basically, it's gone. It's gone forever. Right.
The place
so
in New Jersey, you mean?
Yeah, the place in New Jersey. And so we're like, okay, now, so we really got to come to terms with that. But still, we're all always fantasizing. The goal was come to China, make your millions in a few years, then come back and buy an even bigger home.
Okay. All right.
And but that didn't work out.
You sound quite integrated into the family plans and business and all of that. It doesn't sound like the kind of family structure where the parents are in charge and don't let the kids in on everything that's happening. I mean, you're actually talking about the margins and everything.
No, we saw everything, which is, I mean, in the short term was really something that I really didn't want to see. But now that I'm older, I look back at that, I think it builds a lot of character. Those are experiences you can't buy, it's a very different, they do things very, very differently. So, yeah, learning from that was.
Did you struggle with being different when you were in China? I mean, given that you're a kid who's from America and you have a Persian dad, and I mean, did any of that
By the way, I didn't know he was Persian. He said he was Italian. He said his mom was from Sicily. And then one time we had this actual Italian guy come into our restaurant. And because that's the way that we advertise that. I mean, I could say this now, but I know it's really bad.
The authentic Italian lineage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pizza, I see.
And then one time we had this Italian guy come in. And he's actually Italian. He starts asking my dad questions like, "Oh, where are your parents from?" And he's like, the South Side, like, oh shit. I'm allowed to curse. I don't know.
Yeah, you're allowed to curse. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I'm sorry. Please, I interrupted you.
No. That was my question was whether you felt left out or whether you felt racially strange or any of that when you were in China. I partly asked because we had a guest on it with an Iranian woman who had gone from, I mean, this is a little different from you, obviously, but who had gone by herself from Iran to China as a student, in post-secondary school in China, and then ended up living in Ghana and different places of the world. But her feeling was that there was a lot of racism that she felt it was very clear that she wouldn't have the sort of privileges that others would have who were Chinese in China. That was her sort of report on our show. But I'm curious how it was for you.
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting thing. So like China is racist, but I experienced the other side of racism, not the negative side. And it was just because I do have like lighter skin, and it's really messed up, but it's kind of built into like their beauty standards. Like if you have lighter skin, that's more like all the makeup products are like whitening cream and stuff like that. Right. And so like in school, and everybody's like, these are public schools, right? And Jinan is not Beijing. Beijing is different. One of these big cities, they deal with foreigners more often. Jinan, if you spot a foreigner, it's like once in every blue moon, like everyone kind of knew each other because there's not a lot of them. Right. And so like in the school, like all the girls would come up to me, everyone trying to be my friend. And like, I just got so used to it. I was like, wow. Okay. And like, they just came like, they never seen like a nose this big. Like it was a very different experience. And like, I was very not used to it. When I came back to the US, no one gave a shit about me. I was like, come on, man. Where's all the people would literally stop us on the street, take photos. Like it's really weird. And we're not celebrities. It's just like, you're a white person. Let me take a photo. Right. Very, very different.
I often tell I've told it before on the show, a funny anecdote about how I always hated my big Persian nose. And through my whole life until I got to Vietnam and realized that they find it really attractive. And in Southeast Asia, they're like pointing at it, and in an aspirational way. I was like, I'm living in the wrong part of the world. Clearly. So it sounds like it served you in
yeah, it was a huge confidence booster. It was like, I mean, I didn't deserve it because like I just, but in other ways it was negative, and it's not so much like because I was Iranian or anything. It was more so just foreigner, so anytime you get into any trouble, the court, there's no like due process. It's the courts are always going to favor the Chinese person, right? So like that's just the way it is. And it was, and this is one of the reasons why our business failed. We had investors, and when you invest in something, you're taking a gamble, you're taking a risk, right? They invested into our business, and then numbers weren't doing as good, right? So they lost some of their investment, right? And then they wanted out, but they wanted out what they originally put in, which is, you can't do, like if you invest in a stock and it goes to, it loses some of it. So you can't like sell it how much you bought it and pull out. And then they sued us and then they won, which is like the most ridiculous thing. So we were like hemorrhaging funds. We're like, what is going on? You know,
Right.
because, you know, they bribe the judges and everything. And it's like, oh, it's a foreigner, you know. Chinese people are not, I would say they're not very political, but anytime it's like, they can get really nationalistic sometimes whenever they feel like a foreigner is like encroaching upon us or whatever. So that kind of messed things up a little bit. But culturally, socially, it was very fun. You know, people asked me pictures. I didn't even do anything. It was such a confidence booster. You know, I had like feeling insecure. And I was like, it's not a thing. It's just like, come on, take your photos of me. It was very fun.
So let's zoom forward to where I cut you off, which is the story of you're 16 years old and your dad gets one of those MIDI controller keyboards, like one of those little.
It's like one of those tiny keyboards. It didn't have all the keys. It was cheap plastic, so you could hear like the plastic. But I loved it. I loved it so much. So he bought it for himself, right? But then he's also, you know, my parents were like, you know, why don't you start lessons? You know, all these Asians, you know, they're like playing Moonlight Sonata at age 2. What are you doing? Basically, is what they're saying. And I was like, okay, no, they weren't that mean, but I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it to appease them. I had like no interest, you know. I didn't even like classical music. I was listening to like trap music and like rap music, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
I only knew like one piece. I was like, and it's Moonlight Sonata. That was the only piece I knew. And I was like, wow, this last part here, the third movement, it sounds really cool. And I know I definitely cannot play that, but I want to try maybe like the first part, you know, because it also sounds really peaceful, really nice. And so they found a teacher, you know, she was like fresh out of college or something, you know, like a young person. I go in. They don't have like an actual place. It's in a garage, like, you know, like storage rooms and garages, like people keep their stuff. There's like it's like a musty place, and like there's a upright there, right? And I'm following her there, and you know, there's also there's no privacy. Like it's just a piano and some benches, you know, and there's a bunch of little kids, and I'm 16, you know, and then these people are like 7, you know, 8, and it's kind of embarrassing, you know. I mean, of course, I'm there to learn. Like ultimately, I'm there to learn,
Sure.
right? But it's a little bit like damn, I'm old. Yeah, and I told her, you know, I would love to learn Moonlight Sonata, you know, and I didn't know anything. You know, I don't know the names of the notes. I can't read.
You're not even that into piano. This is something your parents have told you.
I'm just doing it because I want to make them happy, you know. And I don't know what happened with her that day. Like if she ate something bad or a boyfriend broke up with her, like she was not feeling it. She had the sheet music because my mom told her, you know, he wants to learn this piece. She had the sheet music to it. She puts the sheet music on the stand. She's asked me to play it. And I'm trying to explain to her, like, I can't read. Like, you got to start from like 0. She's like, what if you can't read? And like, it is embarrassing. You know, there's like 7-year-old kids, you know, like little kids, and they're all waiting their turn. And I'm like, I can't read. And then long story short, she said some really mean things. And it is a part of like this is common in like Chinese education system. Like I've been beat before by teachers. Like they beat students, and you know, they harass
tough love kind of.
They do that stuff. And so, you know, she was doing that stuff and I didn't like it. So I just left. I just marched back. I was like, you know, screw you. And she made a big deal out of reading sheet music, that I can't read sheet music, right?
This was your first music lesson ever, right?
Yeah, first music. So
had somebody explain this to her. And by the way, what were you doing thinking you could play Moonlight Sonata in your first lesson?
Well, no, I mean, that's all I said. It's like one day I'd like to play this. You know, it's not like I can play this immediately. Like I was like, I didn't know any other classical or piano piece, which is like, this sounds cool. And then so I marched back, and I had my keyboard, and like technically I was homeschooled, I guess. It wasn't really homeschooled though. It was like there was a textbook. You could open it if you want. You know, that's pretty much what went on.
Right.
But that's not what my future high school thought. But you know, that's what went on. And so I had a lot of time in the day. I was kind of
your services weren't required at the pizza parlor.
No, I mean, no. And by that time it was like, it wasn't really working out that much. So we were doing like, you know, my parents were doing odd jobs, like kind of make ends meet.
Okay.
So just because like the investors and their ties to the mafia, they had kind of like taken over the stuff. So we couldn't like step foot in there anymore, which is really, really sad, really annoying. But, but yeah, so like I had a lot of time in the day. I was upset, you know, I was thinking, and a lot of things to be upset about, you know. I was like, and I know I didn't earn, you know, our original mansion, but I was born into that. So you kind of feel like, you know, I had that was mine. And then like, when we moved to Texas, we were homeless for a little bit. So it's like shit. We went from there to like nothing.
Right.
And like, And I didn't notice. This is why I love my dad so much. I didn't even know this at the time that we were homeless. He's like, we're going to go on a road trip, guys. Not knowing we just got evicted. And I was like, we're going on a road trip. And like, he had like $20 in his pocket and that was it. And we had an unpaid like rental car, right? That's all we had, right? He would take us. He's like, guys, we're going to go to, we lived in Frisco, Texas. He's like, we're going to go to Houston. It'll be an amazing road trip. I even vlogged it. Like, that's how like clueless I was. And he's taking us to these restaurants and I'm like, this is so good, Dad. But then I notice he's not eating anything. I'm like, you're not hungry? He's like, no, I already ate. Not knowing, we don't have any money. He's just starving himself so we could eat. I thought the entire time it was the road trip, we're using the restroom at like random places every time, not knowing we don't have a place. Somehow, we somehow managed, we borrowed,
Tremendous learning experience for you.
A lot of learning. And I have so much respect for him. It's like,
so what happened with the keyboard? You go home from the piano lesson, you have time on your hands. So what do you start figuring it out by yourself, right?
Yeah, I look up on YouTube, on Youku, which is like the Chinese YouTube, and there's like Synthesia videos, which is like, so she made sheet music, me not knowing how to read sheet music, like a big deal. So initially my goal was like, screw her, I'm going to learn how to play the piano without ever knowing how to read sheet music. I had a lot of time on my hands. I was really upset and I was like, I'm not going to take any more BS. I'm going to pick something. I'm going to try to become really good at it. I want to prove her wrong. So I was spending on average like 6 hours a day, average 6 hours. Sometimes it was like 8, sometimes it was like 4. But I had nothing else to do. I would just stay in my room. I had the keyboard and I put out these videos and I pick like pieces, like Mozart K545 or something. And I try to match my fingers because you can just match your fingers on there.
Wow.
And I did it over and over and over again. And I did it for like 2 weeks straight. And I was getting a little bit better. I could play, and I made a progress video. I took it down because it got a lot of hate, but
wait, were you starting to like it, or were you still doing this because your parents wanted you to? I mean, where was the turning point where you sort of go, Eureka, I actually kind of dig this. This is not just enforced from my parental declarations.
Yeah. So for the first like 2 weeks, it was just like pure anger. I was like, why is this, this person speaking down to me? I want to prove her wrong. And then somewhere around like the 2-week mark, I accidentally composed something. And I was like, holy crap, this is actually kind of cool. Let me fool around with this more. And I didn't know any theory. All I knew was that pretty much all the pieces I was learning, and now I know the term is homophony. There were homophonic pieces. So that means there was a clear melody, clear harmony. So usually like chord is harmony, the accompanying part, melody is the part you remember, right? Every single one of them was like that, right? So I was like, okay, if the basic structure is that the left hand, and this is not always the case, but just when I started, the left hand is doing the chords, the right hand is doing the melody, right? Then I fooled around, and then by accident, I played a chord, and then I had a melody going. I was like, this kind of sounds cool. And then I expanded on it. I was like, what if I did it with this?
Do you have a keyboard in front of you right now?
I have a little keyboard. It's a little.
Can we hear it, or is it plugged in, or?
Sure, I can share my.
Yeah. Play what you're talking about. Tell you how you first figured this out.
I'm just gonna share my sound. So, can you hear this?
Yeah.
Play. Yeah. So, like the very first thing that I ever composed was this. Some mistakes. This is a very small keyboard. My fingers are a little big, but that was the very first thing. I was like, okay, that sounds kind of cool. I don't know what I'm doing.
Well, wait a second. I still don't get this. With like a few weeks, you could play that?
Well, yeah, it was just chords that being hammered down, and I was spending like hours upon hours just like at the keyboard.
Did you realize you were writing music?
At that moment I did, but the way I really did it is like I was learning existing pieces, and I noticed that there was a lot of patterns. I didn't know Roman analysis and much theory. I didn't really know any theory at that time, but all I knew was like, okay, they're playing like the same chords over and over again. There's like a pattern to it. And so I didn't know even like the names of the chords. It was just like, okay, there's this one, there's this one, there's this one, and they're alternating it. So I would try to like commit these to memory and then see like what works and what doesn't. And then you'd see, so now I know it's known as diatonicism, like using the notes of the scale, right? It took me a while to understand that initially. But I would see like what notes are they using and what notes are they not using, right? Because if you're in the key of D minor, you usually use the notes of the D minor scale, right? but I didn't know that. I didn't know what like any of these scales were. So I was just like, I was looking at their melodies and I was trying to memorize, okay, they hit an A there, they hit an F there, they hit a G, they hit a B flat. So I know, okay, those are good notes that I can hit that would potentially match with one of these chords. And so I did that. And then I also feel like a lot of people, even if they're not like musicians, they have a sense for like musical phrasing almost, right? Like that's why you don't have to be, you don't have to have a PhD in music theory to like be able to like sing along to a song or like, no, okay, this is the hook. This is, they can have like basic understanding of musical structure.
You know what's attractive. You know what sounds good, a good melody that appeals to you. You know that kind of thing, even if you may not be a music genius. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And so that's what I did. And then I started expanding. And for the very like my first like couple of pieces, the only chords I used were like basically 1, 4, 5. Like those were the only chords I used, right? Very basic, I know. But those I would just alternate between that. I was like, oh, I can do like, I can do something like that and then have something else. And then I also did that. I mean, I tried doing like other keys. And then a lot of my earlier pieces are just that in terms of harmony. It's just that. And then one day my brother came into my room. I have 2 younger brothers, and he was like playing the keyboard. He doesn't know how to play either. He didn't know how to play, and he accidentally, I was showing him, I was like, oh, you can play this, right? And then he accidentally, it was an A minor chord. He accidentally shifted his finger down, so the A went to the G. So it was GC. It was like a C major chord. I was like, holy crap, you're a genius, Jacob. What did you just do? And I was like, this is a new chord. This is like, I felt like if I was an artist, it's like you just gave me a new color to work with. If I was working with the green, yellow, and red, it's like you just gave me purple. I was like, holy crap, I've never seen this before. And then I was like, oh my God, I can actually like try new chords. There's more chords than just these first few. Then I got hooked, and then I didn't really care for proving her wrong. I was like, this kind of gives me, a lot of purpose, which sounds, silly and corny, but it wasn't a good time. But we were struggling financially. Parents, fighting and all these, outside things with like lawsuits and all this, right? Just a lot of things you didn't want to think about, right? And so I would compose, and it was like a form of escapism. And so I became just immediately addicted. I was like, this is cool. Some pieces I play, I was like, I'm not in Gina anymore. None of these like crappy circumstances. I'm like, I'm in like some fantasy 1800s Versailles. It's like, it's cool. So that's what got me hooked. And then that's yeah.
I mean, first of all, I feel like you owe that piano teacher, that mean piano teacher, a great debt. I mean, you might even have to take a commission from all your earnings for the rest of your life for so inspiring you to in a fuck you to learn how to play the piano. Like, but secondly, I mean, this industriousness that you have. When did you get to a point where you're doing stuff that you were really proud of, that you were like, wow, this sounds good? How long did it take you to get to that stage? I know you say, well, I was doing it 6 hours a day, whatever, but this is not normal. It's not usual for somebody to, you clearly have some kind of magical touch or facility that is faster than, no, really, you can't bring, even if I take somebody and go off the street and go, okay, 6 hours a day, play the piano, they're not going to become you in a few months, When did you feel like you'd written something really great, and what was it?
So the very first one, like the one I just played you, I like that because I felt like it wasn't like completely bad. I tried out a lot of different like things, artistically, like writing. I'm not good with words and poetry. I mean, like I didn't have an English class. Like I had like a 4th grader's English comprehension when I went to high school. So it wasn't that. I couldn't really draw. I can't sing, and like any of that stuff. So when I had that, I was like, this is one thing I don't completely suck at. So let me just try and, see what happens if I just go all in. I have like that gambler impulsive mentality I got from my dad. Let's just go all in with it. I think my very first one where I actually liked, and I love video game soundtracks. They were also like escapism for me because it was like you're in like the video game world. And I composed something that reminded me of like this video game scene. And that was like the very first one. I was like, I like this. I want to do this for a while. I don't know if I'm going to be.
What was that? Play that for us.
It was, it sounded like this. I like that. I like that a lot. It was inspired by some of the soundtrack that was a part of the video. The video game is called Assassin's Creed Unity. It takes place in Napoleonic France, and so it's like an open world game. You can roam like 18th century Paris and stuff. It's really cool. And I was like, wow, okay, I don't know what I'm gonna do with my life, but I do want to keep making stuff like that because it makes me, go into like the fantasy world. It's like it's escapism. So I say that was like the first one. Yeah.
There's something that we need to point out here, which is that you have a work ethic. I mean, just because you were angry at the teacher doesn't necessarily follow that means you're going to practice 8 hours a day on a piano. I mean, some people would just do drugs or throw something against a wall. Or
I'm so glad I never went like any of that. Like my parents scared the shit out of me with drugs.
It's a stereotype both about Persians and Chinese folks that there's this immigrant work ethic. But where does that come from in you? Is it? Would you say that both of your parents that way, or is it? I mean, where does the kid who by himself decides to spend 6 hours a day on a piano come from?
I want to say my dad, and I want to say that also, I think the unorthodox nature of the way that he came to be is I've also found that very inspiring. For example, and I know I sound biased saying I'm his son, but like at the height of the restaurant, right? This was in Italy. We would have been like super successful. It was everything was authentic. And he learned all of this from like YouTube videos on his iPad. He would go to Starbucks and he'd stay there like all day long. He has a little notebook and there was like this, there's like cooking apps and like, just recipe things. He would just take notes and then he would cook it and it was wonderful. I was like, and I'm a very picky eater. I don't like a lot of food. So I think just like seeing that,
I was going to say, I never think of, being an artist this way, or say a composer, but you are taking an entrepreneurial approach to, I mean, that's what you did, right? You approached music like an entrepreneur, like you sort of went, how do I learn to do this? What could I do? I mean, it's very interesting. So it makes sense that comes from your father. I mean, and this has continued, like you've just graduated college. You got your degree in music at UC Berkeley by doing a 4-year program in only 2 years, which is quite amazing. You are famously self-taught now. Is there, was there, now that you've graduated, was there value in an expensive post-secondary education institution for a guy who seems to be able to learn without one?
Okay. I don't think so. And this is why I still say I'm self-taught. And I promise I'm not trying to be like cocky or anything. I think if you were in there with the classroom, and I'll tell you what, so like, so much of and I'm kind of frustrated. And like, I know I graduated in 2 years. Sometimes I wish I just spent a semester there. I could have crammed everything in a semester because it's like very expensive. And thankfully I got scholarships that covered like pretty much everything. So that I'm very grateful for that, but I still lost time, and time is irretrievable. So many classes were very fluff. There were very rarely any classes that taught much. However, I will say that my experience being there, because that was my first time, I was living alone. I lived in a little room, at a part of a larger house, and it was like sandwiched between fraternity houses that were partying all day long, and you couldn't go out. It smelled like alcohol, but like it was like that environment. But I didn't really learn much from the actual lectures themselves.
Why not?
They didn't really teach much, and like it was kind of frustrating. I don't think I'm a bad student. I want to learn, I'm not there to party. I never attended a single party. I never did any of that stuff. I was there. I was like, I'm here to learn. But I will say that I did learn a lot just during that period. And I know this is like, sounds a bit weird, but like, for example, like one time I was in class and, professors was ranting out about like just useless stuff, right? Or stuff that I already know. It's like, okay, this is just a big fat review. And then I look outside and we have like windows in a lot of these classrooms. You see like the leaves. I'm like, that leaves. And then I think about like an A half to 7th chord. And I'm like, what if I did like that? And then I go to the practice room immediately. And then I'd come up with something new. And I was like, oh crap, I could do that. So I don't know if you could give that credit to like the lecture. Cause I was like, this is boring. But my experience being there, that was also I did my first movie. I composed it while I was in school. It's a feature film. It's like an hour 40-ish. It's still not out yet, but they're still working in post. But like working with the director and getting in the director's head. Like I'd watch his like Instagram stories and stuff, and he'd post like music to his Instagram stories. And I know it's like, okay, he's probably using that piece because he likes it. So I'm gonna steal that chord progression and then implement in one of the leitmotifs. And then when I showed it to him, he was like, oh my God, Josh, this is amazing. Like just that collaborative effort, I learned a lot, but very expensive.
There's an old adage that I love, which is don't let school get in the way of your education. And you know, there may be something to this where, you know, being at university, I wouldn't be the first person to say this. Obviously, this is a, you know, famously the argument sometimes for liberal arts education, for example, is being at post secondary school is not just about what you learn in the classroom, but the experience and the social environment and the, you know, the life growth that happens and all that. So it probably there's probably a bunch of that has been really really valuable to you, to give UC Berkeley that some props, because if they're listening right now, they're not going to be very happy. But it leads me to ask you. I mean, now that you're doing so well, you're playing concert halls, you've got a big following. Are there old school classical musicians, or maybe some of those teachers or traditionalists, who poo-poo you because you haven't had that formal education? I mean, is there,
Oh
do you
yeah,
ever
no,
feel a
I get a
prejudice,
lot of
like this guy can't really play, he's not trained in the right way, you know?
yeah, I get that a lot, especially with the internet, you know, and I'm sure you're familiar with this. Like anyone can say anything, you know, and they can hide behind their computer
Of
screens and
course.
everything. And it's like, so yeah, I get that a lot where it's like the elitists. I get hate from like both sides. So like at least in like the music world, the classical music world, there's like the super traditional people that are like, you know, you can't do anything beyond like the Baroque era, you know, anything beyond it's sacrilegious. And then you have like the super modernist people that are like, if it's tonal, it's old, it's antiquated. We need more experimentation. Like we need like John Cage 2.0, you know that. So I get hate from like both sides. So I piss both of them off. And yeah, I've got a lot of that. And at first I was, you know, because I wasn't used to social like the whole social media following thing. I started posting. My first like actual post was February 19, I believe, 2021. And
Really? You have hundreds of thousands of followers.
I mean, I had a couple followers. It was like my mom, my dad, my brothers, some distant cousin, maybe some person at school I don't know. But that was like the first time I actually posted something, you know, and my accounts were private and stuff, so it wasn't even. It was
But
just
hang
like
on a second. You're not being totally truthful, because even back in China, as a teenager, you were making vlogs. Like,
I was
you've
making
always
vlogs.
been you've had it. You've known how to work social media from back then, right? I mean, you.
I don't. The thing is, I did make vlogs and I tried very hard, and now some of the vlogs they get a little bit more views. But at the height of my vlogging career, let's say, um, it was maybe like 1,000 subscribers and I'd get like 100 views per video, you know. And I never did it for views. I did it because like, and for like now I could look back of like, wow, you know, we went to the beach, you know, I could look back on it and
Right.
I liked it for like
Oh,
capturing the
movies.
memories.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But I will say that I wasn't used to just getting like comments and getting so much interaction. You know, the most interaction I get from like back then would be, you know, just I was always very grateful, you know, like just like one or two people. It's like this is a cool video, you know. Sometimes when you get any comments, that's fine, you know. But then all of a sudden you get like 1,000. It's like, whoa, okay. And I was so dumb. I thought you had to respond to every single one. So if you look at my very first viral video, there's a response to like there's like 1,300 comments. Every single one of them was a response by me. And I didn't know you're not supposed to do that, but I was just
Oh,
so
it's
grateful.
lovely if you can do that, but it becomes a little unwieldy, right? At your level.
Absolutely. No, it does. And I was just like that night, I never experienced before. You know, I had all my notifications on for social media apps and my phone just kept ringing, ring. And like I would go to like the notifications tab and like I just refresh. I'd keep refresh. 5 more comments, 10 more comments. Like every second. And I'm like, my heart was palpitating. I was like, what is going on? And it was the most amount of love I've ever gotten. Cause like you know, my parents, and I love my parents, you know, they're not, no one in my family is like super into classical music. You know, they support me and I'm very thankful for that. But when if you live in the same house as me and you're hearing me like playing the piano all day long, you kind of get annoyed. You get desensitized from it. You know, it's like you hear it all the time. It's like, all right, Josh, stop it. We're trying to watch TV, you know? So like, you know, and that's understandable. I'm not trying to criticize them. But it's the first time I was like, I hear like outsiders, because I never really heard anyone else, and I was actually kind of almost like doubting myself. But I was like, what if I'm not as good as an artist and all these things?
Why do you think that you've caught fire in a positive way in social media? I mean, some of those TikTok posts of yours have over 1 million views or 500,000 views. What do you think it is? I mean, you're a guy playing classical music. It doesn't necessarily follow that you're going to get that kind of love. What do you suspect the reason is?
I think it's because everything that I play is always some sense original. Classical music is almost seen as like a dead art in the modern day. And I think that there's not a lot of us out there. And everything I play is somewhat original. So even if I'm playing, this comes from my like unorthodox learning method, it's like if I'm playing you like a Chopin nocturne, I'm not actually playing you the exact nocturne. I'm playing it to you by ear, what I heard, and I'm improvising over it. So like I'll play you like OP9 number 2, which is an E flat, but I'll play it to you in A because I feel like it. And like it's a totally different thing. I'll mix it with like Liszt Liebestraum. It's like
you're a heretic.
It's different.
You're a heretic. You shouldn't be allowed near a keyboard. How dare you?
Yeah, so I think that has a big role with it. I think that everything I do, even if it's playing existing pieces, it's like my original interpretation of it. To this day, even though I can read you sheet music, so I'm not really following strictly what I set out to do originally. I know how to read sheet music. I can notate it. It takes me ages to sight read something, to actually play something. Like I still have to do every good boy does fine face, or good boys do fine ace G for like bass clef. I still have to like recite the mnemonic devices, which is really, it's kind of embarrassing, but like,
amazing. I mean, that's totally okay. You're breaking the rules, but you're doing it in a way that obviously appeals to people and certainly sounds fantastic. I love you listening to your recordings. Who is your audience? Who are these hundreds of thousands of people that follow you?
Well, I can check like demographics wise. It's a lot of young people. I have some older people as well.
Are they in the States? Are they around the world? Who are they?
Most are in the States. I actually have a substantial portion in Iran, and I think it's because I played like Golden Dreams, and I played like I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, like Sultana Galba.
Come on, genius!
Oh,
Put you on the spot here.
Can you hear this?
Yeah.
It's like. That one. It's that one. It's I believe from a movie, but it's very, very catchy. I love the chromatic line it has.
Do these Iranians know that they must know that you're half Iranian, right?
I think most can tell from my last name. Yeah. So mostly States. I have some European ones. It's cool though. It's very, very, very interesting. The internet is a very interesting piece of technology because like this would have like never been possible. Like it's very, very interesting.
What do your parents make of this success you're having?
Well, they originally they were like the stereotypical like, we want you to become a doctor or a lawyer. And when I got accepted,
even though they were enthusiastic about you playing piano, but they didn't anticipate that would be a career, I guess.
Yeah, no, they did it because, and I can understand that from a parent's perspective. It's a very risky, anything in the entertainment industry is very, very high risk, high reward. Yeah, so I was going to be a doctor and I was doing great. I was studying like 10-hour days, I was studying all these things. Right. But then the second I saw blood, it was just like, nah, I can't do this. I'm
right.
fainting. So I can't do that. So then I was like, okay, I like physics. Physics is actually cool. And I still like physics to this day, like theoretical physics. And that actually took some convincing because physics is not a doctor. I was like, well, if I get my PhD, technically I'll be a doctor. So I had to convince them for that. And when I applied to undergrad, I got accepted to UC Berkeley as a potential physics major. All my essays were about physics.
Okay.
It's non-binding, but they asked you, what do you want to study? I said physics. And then a week before classes, I was like, you know what? I really like music though. So I switched to music and I didn't tell them at first.
Oh, wow.
And it was the COVID era. So all the lectures were at home online. I was like, crap, they could kind of hear, they're like, oh, there's a lot of music classes, but like, you're going to enroll in any physics classes when you have your physics, your STEM classes. And I had to break it to them like, guys, I kind of did a 180 there. And so they were surprised.
They've got to be blown away by your.
Now they're good. Now they're good.
Yeah. I mean, this is I mean, look, you're on this program, and you're on this program as a star of an instrument that you didn't know how to play 6 years ago. I mean, it's the whole story is a remarkable one. I want to, before we end off, I want to make sure to have time to ask you about your interest in film scores and composition, really beyond the piano. I actually want to play a little bit of a piece called Enemies to Lovers. This is something you've just put out this year, at least on Spotify. I don't know when you wrote it.
Yeah, February 22.
Let's listen to a bit of this. This is Joshua Kyan Aalampour and Enemies to Lovers. I mean, that's you playing all the instruments, right?
Yes, I can't actually play the violin, but it's it's through a DAW. It's that is one of my most known pieces right now.
In other words, you did that all by yourself, is what I mean. You did.
Yeah. It's all me, and actually the second part, right after a climax, where we had the piano. It's sneaking in some of my other, like the raindrop waltz is there. I don't know if you noticed, but the raindrop waltz is hidden there alongside with another piece.
Your leitmotif. I mean,
my leitmotifs.
Full circle.
I love leitmotifs so much.
It's your Darth Vader theme. It comes in wherever we hear from you. If your aspiration was to do film scores, it doesn't sound like you're very far off. I mean, that sounds like an epic film score. Do you even have a sense right now? I feel like this kind of term is so overused, but I really feel like the world is your oyster when it comes to this stuff right now. It's in front of you. Do you feel like you know where you want to go with this?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go all in. I'm gonna go all in, and
all in which direction? In the film scores?
Film scores, and just continuing with my craft. I've thought about this for a while. I know this is not for everybody, but I don't want to live like a stable life if that means that I'm not pursuing my passion. And I know that's very cliche, so I'd much rather be like broke, but I'm still composing, as opposed to living a stable life, but I'm doing something I don't like. So I'm going to go all in.
Says the 21-year-old in a fancy apartment that he's got now.
Well, no, it wasn't always like this, but I'm very, very thankful. Like it's actually incredible. This past year, TikTok made my career. No one knew about my music. And like, I'm talking to you, like, I'm extremely grateful. Everything's going so fast, and it's weird to take it all in. It's a very interesting feeling.
Are you going to do concerts? Are you going to tour and play?
I would love to. I have terrible stage fright, but I got to get rid of that. And, even like the Lincoln Center performance, I was supposed to play. I was the only composer there. And so I played my own piece, and it was a rhapsody I wrote. It was like 7 minutes long. And I completely forgot the middle. It's in ternary form. I completely forgot I had a middle section, so the performance only ended up being like 3.5 minutes long. And everyone was clapping because I still transitioned. I made it work. But my mom has a video. My head is down. I'm like, oh shit, I just left out an entire section. But they couldn't tell because it's their first time hearing. So, but
well, you still have some fresh material for the next Lincoln Center gig. Oh, he's expanded on that 3-minute piece that he had written. Joshua Kyan Aalampour, first of all, your energy is infectious. I've seen this on the videos you make and your life updates, as you call them. And I wondered if you'd be like this in an interview. You are. It's really a joy to talk to you. You're full of mirth and laughter, and I love the interaction with your younger brother sometimes in some of your videos. It's so cute. You guys are a great team. You got to integrate him into your stage show somehow.
I do. I missed him very much. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your kind words.
Thanks so much for doing this. We'll keep to following you. I want to go out on some music from you. What would you like us to play as we go out?
Oh man, that's hard.
From your Spotify / YouTube / TikTok canon, what should we choose?
Sure. Well, Return to Versailles is pretty nice. The climax is nice. It's a piece I composed. I was inspired by just the interior design of the Palace of Versailles, and yeah.
Did you go to the Palace of Versailles?
No, I haven't. I'm fake, I know, but I'd love to one day.
Well, that's okay. I mean, it was inspired by, okay. So, I mean, that becomes a new aspiration. You can take the soundtrack with you there. We'll play that. We'll play that. And thank you again, man. What a joy it is to talk to you. Congrats on how much has happened for you in recent times. And I really do believe it's from all your hard work and obviously your magical touch that you have. Some nature and nurture both in there clearly, I believe.
Thank you so much.
Stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, John. Don't call me sir, Jian.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to be polite.
I'll call you sir though. Thank you, brother. Talk to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. The sounds of Joshua Kyan Aalampour, another composition of his own. What a pleasure it was to talk to him. This is Roqe episode 266. Listen, my next guest is an author and an award-winning psychotherapist specializing in PTSD. Shirin Amani Azari was born in Tehran, raised in Sweden. She's been working with the victims of torture and war at the Refugee Support Center and Refugee Therapy Center in London, England since the year 2000. She's just published a new book, her second, entitled Once Upon a Time in Uppsala, the autobiographical story of her immigration to Sweden as a kid and the realities of being an immigrant. The book is having its Swedish launch on June 10th in Stockholm, so if you are in and around Sweden, be sure to attend it in a week or so. But first, right now, Shirin Amani Azari joins me from London today. Hello.
Hello, Jian. Good to be back.
Congratulations on your new book. I've really enjoyed reading this.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I didn't know you had read it, but thank you. Yes.
I'm not going to do an interview with you about a book without reading it, but of course I've read it. And now I know all kinds of things about you, at least you as a kid, that I didn't know before. Why, Shirin, why did you feel like this was the right time to write a book about your journey and life as an immigrant kid?
I think the way the politics is going, I think it's just there was a need for it. I felt that it's becoming much harder to be a refugee, to be an immigrant. The system is being harsher. And I thought that it was a good time to have a voice for those who do not want to voice their challenges in the system. Do not make a scene, be quiet, be grateful for what you're given. It's a safe country. You're safe now. And I just wanted to say it can be very, very challenging for especially children and young people.
Let me get into the challenges, but what you're saying in terms of how it's more difficult now is counterintuitive. I mean, we tend to think, I believe, that it's a more globalized world now. All the major cities in the world are very, diverse, and so it would be a lot easier to be an immigrant now than it would have been, say, 30 years ago and 30 years before that.
No, definitely not. I think what I can see from working with refugees and asylum seekers, it's much, much harder than it used to be. And also, I think the perception of how difficult it can be, what they carry, and there's nowhere that especially children and young people can sort of express their feelings towards their losses, how much quicker than other children they have to grow up and mature in order to be a bridge between the motherland and the foster land, and be a guide to their parents and families without having any guidance themselves.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
you have to find out your way, your path into the new system, into the new country, the language, extremely challenging and very different language, very different culture on your own.
And let me come back to that. Let me come back to whether it's more difficult now or not. But what you're saying in terms of the challenges faced by immigrants, and especially by young people who are immigrants, you do this very well in the book. You do it by just telling simple little stories about what happened with you and your life and your little best friend and all of that. But without hitting us over the head, you're really making some profound points about what it's like to be an immigrant. I'm gonna lead people through the book a little bit and through some of the points that you make, which I through the stories you tell, which I, as I say, I quite enjoyed. A general question first. You speak of experiencing, and you begin the book by experiencing Sweden as a kid, and everything is different, from the cold weather to the TV shows to the way people are talking. Were you upset at your family for immigrating from Iran?
I think I wasn't so much upset with my family. I knew that we had to leave, but I didn't want to leave. When we came to Sweden, and maybe that's something that many relate to, when you come to a different country, it felt for me that it was, you were faced with the losses there and then. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't as if, you know, we're going home one day. And I truly lived with that hope. And I think I still do, that one day I will go back. But you face the reality and the harshness of it when you had to adjust.
I should note that you left in the mid-'80s, and the precipitant was the idea that there's the Iran-Iraq war happening. You left with your mom and your little brother, and the idea was that your dad would stay in Iran and that you guys would sort of wait out the war and hope that it would end soon, and it didn't. And of course, we'll get into your dad eventually joining you guys in Sweden. That's the context for it. You talk about the political structure in Sweden, and you say, I want to quote you in the book, you say, the democracy within politics, the democracy felt agonizing. The freedom of thought and speech felt torturous, coming from a land where you're told what to think, what to believe, what to say, how to be. So you say it took a while before you would actually open up and even express opinions. And actually, it's such a profound point, because that mirrors what is said about often now today, new Iranian immigrants who, for example, don't want to get involved in ruffling political feathers, so to speak, and who, as we've talked about, especially in the recent months with the uprising, et cetera, who don't have actual experience with doing democracy, so to speak. Can you speak about this? Both in your memories as a kid, but also as a psychological disposition as a professional?
Yes, I think it was difficult. Even as a child, we left Iran in the mid-'80s, as you say, 85. And what happened in schools was that you were questioned at school in Iran whether your father would be drinking. Does he drink alcohol? You know, you had that investigation at school, even in Iran. So you had to be very careful what to say in school in Sweden. So, and I remember many of us were scared of police officers, you know, even when they came to school to say that this is what we're doing about the traffic lights that would give us education in regards to it. We felt really, really scared, thinking that, oh my God, you know, police officers, that's just so different to life is like in Iran. So I think it did feel that we had to think twice. You had to learn about that democracy. You had to learn, even in a class of few, you had to be able to learn it's okay to give your opinion. and you can agree to disagree. It's okay if I believe in God and the person sitting next to me doesn't. And if the other one has a religion that I don't believe in, but we can discuss it, we can talk about it. We don't have to convince each other.
But the word torturous, that idea that the freedom of thought and freedom of speech is felt torturous, why is that? Is it because of the intimidation of not knowing that you're allowed to do this? And I mean, it's such an interesting idea, right? It's like the whole reason you're leaving this country is because you're being told to paint within these lines and you want the freedom to paint beyond the lines. But once you get that freedom, you're intimidated by the thought of doing that, right?
Absolutely. And I think torturous, yes, it was. It felt that you hadn't been allowing yourself to think freely. You've always been said what to believe in. So coming to a country where everybody was free to express themselves and to think freely, that did feel, yes, torturous, absolutely.
Or to think critically, that being lauded for thinking critically rather than punished for thinking critically, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And at the age of 12, I remember that very clearly, that it was very confusing just to be able to do that. And you don't start doing that at home so much. You start it at school, and gradually you bring it in indirectly into the home environment and say that this is what I learned today. And it's okay. And I can say this and I can think this. And I thought that scenario or that opinion is okay. It sits well with me.
I love your relationship with, there's a Turkish immigrant girl in school named Turkan. She's still your friend today, you say in the book. And in the beginning, you guys don't speak each other's languages. You're speaking Persian, she's speaking Turkish, but you're united by this immigrant experience, and that you actually start to speak to each other in a nascent form of Swedish. So you're learning to speak Swedish together, and you're both these immigrants. This experience and this sense of relating to each other, I believe, is something that only immigrants can understand, that on some level we relate to each other no matter where in the world we are from. Yes? Can you speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. I think we were each other's savior. I think she just learning about life together was just phenomenal. Yes, she's still a sister to me. She was here at my book launch in London, and she will probably be in Sweden too. She speaks Farsi fluently. And I understand Turkish because of her. Yes, and we formed a language to understand each other that just her and I do. Yes, everybody should have a friend like Turkan. She saved me in a way that she was my partner in crime. She was a sister to me, and we discovered Sweden together. We discovered a land of unknown. And yes, we laugh about our experiences today, embarrassing experiences somehow, but we can talk about that and we can laugh at those today. And not only did we discover Sweden together, but she had to understand my culture, and I had to learn about her culture too, to understand where we were coming from. Do you see what I'm saying? So she had to understand why I think the way I do and do not understand the Swedish culture.
But at the same time, that commonality, that part that you and your relationship with Turkan reminded me of, and I've talked about this before, but when I first came to Canada, my best friends immediately were a Pakistani kid named Roy, a black kid who had come from the Caribbean named David, and then we became family friends with this family who were Pakistani and German, and so Omar, and then a Greek kid named Aris, all of whom were recent immigrants. In a city that was still predominantly at that point a white city, and it wasn't my reflex now looking back on it to become friends immediately with the quote-unquote Canadian kids, the kids who'd been here for generations, but I gravitated towards these new immigrants and they gravitated towards me even though they weren't Iranian. And so there's this similarity that you and Turkan are experiencing, even though you're not as involved in her culture any more than you are in Swedish culture. You're learning about being Turkish and all of that, but you guys are united by this experience, yes?
Absolutely. And I think we just connected and linked, and we learned about Sweden together. We learned through a very tough way. It was challenging for both of us, but having each other meant a lot. I think it just made it easier somehow to have someone to understand that it's hard, that it's challenging, that you're going through losses and trying to make sense of the new world.
Sometimes it's comical. There's a chapter in the book where you describe a scene in which you and Turkin, your bestie, see a Swedish woman tanning, and the woman has no clothes on, and you two are both shocked. And the Swedish adults that you go to say, well, this is not a big deal. I mean, this person is tanning. That's what we do. And on the other hand, you kiss Turkin on the cheek in class at one point, and that becomes a whole incident, this scandalous incident. So these cultural norms crashing against each other are part of the immigrant othering and obstacles of assimilation. What did you learn from experiences like that and writing about them?
I'm glad you brought it up, but yes, about that kiss on the cheek, it sort of felt that when we greet each other, we kiss. We give each other 2 kisses on each cheek. And I don't understand what the big deal is when, exactly as you say, the Swedish are very liberal when it comes to physical contact. And it felt really, really strange in a way. But cultural crashes like that, some I've written in the book and some I haven't. It made us understand the Swedish culture and the norms more and together. And obviously bringing that to the Swedish teacher who would probably guide us through this outside the lesson. There wasn't anyone who would go, we couldn't go to a lesson and say, let's have a lesson in what Swedish culture is about. But outside lesson, you could bring up experiences like that, and they would tell us a little bit about how it's done and how it's said and what to do and what not to do. And
you don't totally get comfortable with it, even when it's explained to you. Yes, women can be nude here when they're tanning. It's not something that you and Turkin are going to start doing, right? I mean, it's as evidenced later on when you talk about a camping trip and you're completely a fish out of water. You don't understand the whole point of camping, which the Swedes are enjoying in the rain and in the dirt and everything. So these things are very they almost become silos because you're trying to understand, but you're at the same time thinking, well, I'm not going to go take off my clothes and tan.
No, but I learned that this is the way it is, and this is the way they enjoy themselves. And I learned it through a very harsh way. As a 12-year-old, you're very much conscious and you don't want to embarrass yourself. I did have my norms set. So it was very much like, this is who I am. This is how things are for me. And that culture I live by, and this is you. So I didn't even understand what it meant. I still don't, what he wanted from me, holding hands and going to the cinema.
Right. You're referencing a point where you go on a camping trip and a Swedish boy comes in the middle of the night to your tent and says, let's go skinny dipping. And you say no, and you never understand why he ends up just going to another girl, as you explained. But there are several times throughout the book describing your early years as immigrants in Sweden that you chronicle how homesick you and your mother could be and could become, and how out of place you could feel, and how you pined to be back in Iran. It's an interesting paradox about immigration in a lot of cases. The idea is that you leave your home country to go to a better place, and you acknowledge it's a better place. We are going to a better place for our children, say Sweden, Canada, whatever. And sometimes the people of your new adopted country, as the Swedes were with you, believe you should be grateful to be there, and you are, but at the same time, you desperately miss the place that you're from and that you chose to leave. Explore that paradox, if you will, because I'm sure this is something that you face all the time dealing with immigrants and refugees in your work.
Yes, I have to say that it was very different for me personally. It was more like, I'm an Iranian. I'm full of beautiful culture. We have a beautiful history, and I'm very proud of it. Even today, when I have my Swedish friends over from Sweden, They know that, they text me and say, can you make some zerish polo like your mom used to do? So for me, it was like, you enter my culture, you learn about me and my culture. That's how you get to know me. So I was very much like, yes, okay, this is your culture. I get that, I understand that, and I respect it. But for me, this is my culture. I've adapted to yours. You need to also learn when you enter my home that this is Iran to me. And they appreciated that. I wanted to also say that this is who I am, and being Iranian is a big part of me. It has always been, will always be.
Right, but I understand all of what you've just said. I appreciate it. But what I'm getting at is there is a paradox. It's understandable to me if a Canadian says, okay, you're an immigrant from Sri Lanka or Iran or Colombia, and you should be grateful to be here. I mean, it sounds like an arrogant attitude, but I get it. We are grateful. We came to Canada because, my parents thought this is a better place for our kids to grow up. We're going to go to Canada. At the same time, there's this homesickness for the country that we come from, and my parents have their whole life in Canada, loved being Canadians, but pined for the Iran that they had left behind. It's a confusing reality to carry with you in everyday life, right?
Absolutely. Homesickness, I think it's been with me since 1985. And the fact that you should be grateful, yes, you hear that all the time. You heard that all the time as a child, and you hear it all the time. The society, even working with refugees today, many of them are expected to be grateful. And I think to a degree we are. Yes, absolutely. But we need to distinguish between the fact that we're grateful, or are we carrying, the guilt of having to be grateful.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So that's something that I don't want to, being owed the country for what I've been offered. Yes. I am grateful, but I don't want to owe you anything. Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't want to carry the guilt of having been
the burden of having to always bend to you because you let us into your country, so to speak. That is now our country as well, especially as these countries become, even Sweden, having visited Stockholm, it's increasingly a diverse place. So what it means to be Swedish is also can be people who come from different places of the world who are now in Sweden are Swedish, right? So at one point, one of your neighbors as a kid there in Uppsala is moving out after she has a divorce, and you and Turkin, your friend, are shocked that she doesn't have family members helping her. Again, it's such a small little story, but it makes a really good point because it's a story that illustrates the intense family orientation of Iranians. It would be unthinkable that this person is packing her stuff by herself. Where is your extended family and your cousins and your brothers and sisters and your mother? But also you make the point, and I think quite gracefully, that the Swedish woman does not necessarily see this as a big issue or as loneliness, but a form of respect that Swedes have for privacy and being left to do their own thing. I don't want my family around me 24/7. So tell me about that if you can.
For me, the biggest shock was that, oh my God, she's gone through a divorce. And she was, what I learned from that experience was also that it's okay. You can divorce. It doesn't have to be such hardship, where in Iran it would be. I'm not sure how it is today, but it was at the time. So you would lose your children, you would lose your home, and of course your family would be there to support you because it's so hard and you lose everything. So for me, it felt like, oh my God, here she is, and she's going through such hard time, and she doesn't have anyone. And also what I learned from that experience was also the fact that she said, the love died. We didn't love each other anymore. So to me, it felt like, oh my God, did you work at it? Did you do anything? Are you just divorcing? Because, so that was also a concept that I had to struggle with. Again, something that I had to learn. I remember that moment really clearly, that it felt, where's your mom? Where are your siblings?
What I was trying to get at with that is that we Iranians have this intense family bond, that sometimes it's an enforced family bond, but listen to your parents, take care of them. The parents have to be around the kids. Everybody has to be involved in each other's lives, etc. I believe that we're very proud of that. We like that. Oh, look at us. We're really good with, we have close families. But that we sometimes judge other cultures that aren't this way. I mean, look at these people. They let their kids run around without even knowing what's going on in their lives, or they're not mourning the way they should at a funeral, or whatever it might be. And I thought what you were, maybe I'm wrong, but I thought the point that you were making in that moment was that you and Turkin are kind of judging her. You're kind of going, well, where's this person's family? But for her, it's not a sign of disrespect or any lack of love for her family that they're not there, because she's kind of going, well, they've got other things to do. We respect each other's lives. And, and I just thought that was an interesting point that you were subtly making about not judging each other.
Yes. It's different perspectives. It's different culture. And I think that's Swedish for you. This is what Swedes do. They want to have their space. They want to do their own things. I mean, somebody falls on the street, my immediate action would be to go and say, can I help you stand up? The Swedish person who's fallen would look up to me and say, I'm quite capable of standing up myself. Thank you very much.
Right.
Oh, no, that's the kind of attitude you would get. And I had to learn about that. Yes, that was one lesson. The lady who wanted to, divorce, she wanted to see how to pack her own things. She didn't want anyone in the way. She wanted to, go through the process on her own. And that was okay, too, for her. Right. This was her way. And in that culture, it's quite acceptable. You don't have to, as you say, mourn it. She didn't probably see it as a big loss. And I learned that was okay, too.
There's another memory, Shirin, in the book about a time you go camping, this time with your mom, or you guys go on a trip, and there's a Swedish girl who actually eventually becomes your friend, who asks you why you are in Sweden, and says, I would never leave my homeland. And you tell her, well, the answer is complicated. And I mean, you're 12 years old and you're already exhausted at the prospect of having to explain this to everybody, And this is part of the burden of the immigrant, isn't it? Needing to explain, why are you here? That question, even if it is asked in innocence.
Absolutely. And you had to deal with that. I think many of us had to deal with it. We had explain as much as you can and then just leave it, because there's no point in saying to someone that, why you have to leave your home. But also, many times we're faced at school with questions like, how many camels did your father own? But then you had to learn a way to communicate with that question, like saying something like, as many as polar bears as your dad has, things like that. You just had to, so that they would understand and get how crazy the concept of craziness of that question.
You're saying your family doesn't own camels? How dare you? I thought we all owned camels back in the old country.
They weren't that rich.
The other thing is, I mean, that said, we also judge other people. We know this about Iranians. And there's an honest story you tell of your reaction when an Iraqi boy named Jalil joins your school. Now, you're only 12, but you see him as the enemy and you resent your brother for being nice to him. How do you feel about that, looking back on it now, about the feelings you had about this Iraqi kid who, was another immigrant like you, Jalil, who was in your school?
I'm grateful to that experience. I'm grateful I met him. Otherwise, I would have carried that hate, that false perception of what I was carrying. I wouldn't have had any opportunity to explore what was going on inside me. I saw him as someone who had taken my family, my home, everything that I believed in and loved. I'm absolutely grateful. We did become friends. I'm not sure where he is now, but...
Do you feel some shame about the way that you reacted to him and treated him at first? No?
no, I don't. Thinking about it, at the time, I was quite sure about my feelings. And I was sure that these are the right feelings. But then what my mom did,
You end up going home, and this Iraqi kid is in your home, and your mom is entertaining his mom, having tea
Yes.
or something like that, and you're sort of shocked that your mom is allowing these Iraqis into the Iranian home, and then you sort of get after. But I don't know how I feel about that response when you say, these were the feelings I had. I mean, that would be an excuse for any kind of racism. No, these are the feelings I had about Jews, or the feelings I had about. I mean, you can't, I mean, the way you reacted to poor little Jalil was not fair, right?
I'm not ashamed of the feelings that I had, because for me at that time they felt so real. And I think it's important for me to highlight that, because racism comes from a very unaware, people who are racist, they haven't had the opportunity to explore what I experienced and what I explored with my mom and what I went through. So if I hadn't, I wouldn't have known about my own feelings and how to handle it, how to carry it, how to package it. So I think that's important. Of course, looking back now, I feel grateful for having had the opportunity with Jalil to go through it and understand where I was coming from, and thinking that my mom is right. He's also in the same situation as me.
Yeah. Quite literally.
That learning process, that I'm grateful for.
Again, I mean, if there's one sort of underlying feeling in the book, it's in terms of your exploration of being an immigrant, it's the unity that we feel, as we talked about earlier, with other immigrants. There's a scene from your childhood where someone you call the big girl, there's this big Swedish girl that wants to beat you up. You've won this story contest in school, and she says something sort of racist about, how dare you come to my country and win this award or this distinction. And so she's going to beat you up, and she's bigger than you, and she's intimidating you, and you're soon joined in solidarity. I don't know, you're in a schoolyard or something, right? But you have other Iranian kids, and then this gaggle of different immigrants come, and it's like a scene from a movie. They all come around you to support you as she tries to intimidate you. What did you learn in that moment and from that story?
That was such a beautiful moment. It was just me thinking that I've owned this and earned this, and I'm owning it. This moment is mine, and you're not taking that away from me. And as a child, you don't understand, probably now you would think that she's going through something, it's her own issues. But at the time, you wouldn't think like that. It was, no, this is mine. You're not taking that moment away from me. Even if you have to kill me, right here and right now, I'll just die gracefully. But this is mine. So having others just walking up, and I didn't realize until I felt that there are other children behind me, it was beautiful. It was a moment of Irani Hastim. We're all Iranians, and we just, no matter what, we're standing,
Well, it starts with the Iranians, but then the little Turkish kids and the others come and join you too, right?
Yes, absolutely. We all stood there.
Which says that they see you ultimately as one of them. It's sort of the immigrants coming together, and I thought it was quite a vivid and beautiful scene.
It was beautiful, and it was great to have done that, because we moved up to that school, and I felt that I had already made friends, and I knew the students from that school. So it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
I guess it's about a year or two in that your dad finally joins you, and you and your mom and your brother in Sweden. And it is bittersweet for you, because you realize, as wonderful as it is to have your dad finally reuniting with you guys, that this de facto means you're likely not returning to Iran. Tell me about coming to terms with that.
It was hard, because we left with 2 suitcases. That felt like we're going on holiday, and then finally realizing that that's all from home. That's all we can carry, we can bring from home. And going back to how close families are in Iran, how grandparents and uncles, and it was a proper goodbye. It felt like this is it. is coming now, and we don't get to see them, which was the case with my maternal grandmother, and I never got to see her. But it was fabulous. It was fantastic to see my dad, to be reunited with him, but that meant the end.
And you've said earlier that you still feel like you're waiting to get to go back home to a certain extent.
Yes, every day.
It's a lovely little book. I hope people check it out. I'm excited for your launch next week in Stockholm and on June 10th. For people who are listening in Sweden, go out and see. Can people come? Can the public come to your launch?
Yes.
Where is it?
People can come. So this is in the English bookstore in Södermalm.
And Shirin,
I wish you all could come.
Yeah, I wish I could come to Stockholm to see your launch there. Before I let you go, you do dedicate this book to Mahsa Amini and Iranians who've been fighting for freedom in recent months. Why did you want to dedicate this to this cause?
My heart goes out. I mean, working with refugee and asylum seekers, victims of war and torture, my heart goes out to everyone who, like me, believe that there will be democracy one day in Iran, and they work hard at it. So this is why I'm dedicating it to Women Life Freedom Movement and to Mahsa Amini, who started this movement.
Thank you for the chat. It's always nice to have you on the program, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you very much, John. As always, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is Roqe episode 266. My next guest is an Iranian scientist and researcher based in Ottawa, Canada, Dr. Nima Taefeshokhr. He was born and raised in Tabriz. He moved to London, England to pursue his education in 2013, obtained his master's degree in biomedical immunology from the University of East London, and his doctorate in immunology research from Brunel University, London. He currently is a scientist, cancer immunologist in Ottawa, and he's just co-authored an article entitled Suppression of Academics and School Training in Iran During the Women Life Freedom Revolution. It has been published in the Biochemistry and Cell Biology Journal from Canadian Science Publishing. And right now, Dr. Nima Taefeshokhr joins me from Ottawa today. Hello, sir.
Hi, thanks for having me here, Jian.
It's nice to have you on the program, Nima John. This is an interesting article. It occurs to me it's relatively common knowledge that the regime in Iran, at this point for the Iranian community at least, has been cracking down or combating any dissent and punishing those active against their rule. And that includes, of course, notably professors and students who've been involved in the uprising. But what was interesting to me about your article is you talk about this in a broader sense as a form of academic suppression in Iran. Tell me the impetus to write this piece.
Well, basically, Jian, I can tell that we had like several reports out there, talking about like the impulsion, suppression of academics and students. But we didn't have this like probably the adequate papers like out there, just published in this like a standard format for a journal with a quite detailed analysis on the suppression. So we did this. So basically, it wasn't like very briefly. I'll tell you this, that this was not like very our team's first collaboration and write up. So we did like, if you remember, we had like this brutal attack on students at Sharif University. So it was last year, October, I think.
Yeah.
So we just like had this like editorial letter, like in very prestigious journal. So like briefly, we talked about how this like the movement started and how like the universities all over like 140, just across all Iran, just joined it, and how like they were all attacked brutally by this riot police and security forces, and even like open fire on them. And also in that piece, we just like focus on this like diversity and inclusion of like women in academia, that for years they've been like fighting against this social discrimination, like impose the state, regulation, like for their employment and even their admission to the university. that is so kind of ridiculous that how your appearance and the way that you put your clothes on can just like affect your future and career aspirations. So that was the paper that basically we just, extended our hands to some scholars all around the world. So I asked them to join in this movement and then, condemn this statement, what has been done by the regime. I mean, so, but in this paper, as I said, when you submit a paper to these like journals, like a scientific journal, you have to have like this standard format. You have to have like an abstract, intro, data analysis and discussion. So that's what we did actually. So at some point, it was hard to get those data, that these kind of data are classified as secret or top secret in Iran. So it was really hard for us to get our hands on those data. So we just collected that from mainly from valid sources like human rights activists or Union Council of Students of Iran. We also like generated these figures like bar graphs and stuff. We mainly talked about students and professors. First section of the paper I'm talking about. In the second section, it's all about like the gas attacks to students in school. So in the first section, basically, the numbers of the professor and students, and the different provinces and the sentences that, they got and went through, that's, the madness, what I can tell, like over like 700 students detained. And if you're talking about like the professor, the sentences that they got, even like for just not being active in the like the protest itself, but just being fired, suspended, forced resignation, like being prevention of the promotion academic career. But for the students, it was like more like apart from the suspension and expulsion, it was imprisonment and torture. Like for
let me just slow you down a little bit. You said a lot there. I know you're short on time, but let me just try and make sure everybody can comprehend and consume everything you're saying. Where I was getting at with the academic suppression is, like I say, we've on this program and in many programs talked about how a student who speaks out against the regime will get punished. We've seen that with professors. We've certainly seen it with students. And I'm going to ask you about the gas attacks in a moment. But we think of that in some sort of a la carte way. You do something bad and then you're punished for it unfairly, however you want to see it, by this regime. This idea of academic suppression feels much broader. And in your piece, you cite the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations, and of course, Article 26, which says everyone has the right to education. Do you believe that young people are not experiencing the right to an education in Iran today?
Definitely. So they have like very severe struggles, when we're, because this is more kind of also like relevant to this gas attacks. Everyone knows that we have like this religious groups in Iran, like religious fanatics, that they're against the education, especially for women. So I know that they've been like at the front line, just standing before the crowd and like showed impressive audacity, but this is actually happening. So we have still this, like mentality in some of these groups in Iran. That's the reason, we had like this horrible like gas attacks, which was, as I said, combined with their impressive role, which they play a really key role in this, protests, revolutionary movement. Yes, there is. That's what I can tell. So, and we can, go deep into this gas attacks if you're interested. But also, like important thing I can mention here is like how we reached out to large numbers of like scholars around the world from 18 countries, like 65 institutions. Even some of them were like shocked at some point because they didn't know, most of them know what's going on in Iran, but some of them were deeply shocked. And they expressed their solidarity, went through the paper, provided their very valuable feedbacks on the paper. This was quite impressive what we did.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that too. But just a last point on the right to an education. It's a little bit, I find, counterintuitive in the sense that one of the things that the regime in Iran trumpets in the midst of all the diversity of opinions that people have about this regime, almost all of them negative, of course, especially in the Iranian diaspora, but is that, we've been good for education, that in the last 45 years, there's more people who are literate than there have been before. And so talking about an assault on the actual right to an education is quite outstanding, given the way the government of Iran portrays what they do.
Yeah, it is. So definitely. So we had this, as I said, we have this mentality in some groups in Iran. So, and also like what happens, if we have like more girls, like I think over 50% of the girls are graduated. What's the future? What's the hope that they have inside Iran? What's their, employment like? So we have like so many struggles. So, and, fundamentally, corrupted.
What did you guys make of, I mean, the gas attacks, these poisonings of young students, particularly girls and young women in schools, was just so barbaric, so shocking that even for Iranians who are used to hearing shocking news coming out of Iran, this was sort of next level stuff. What are we to make of this? What do you guys make of this? This is not just firing professors or detaining students. What do you make of these gas attacks on students in recent months?
Yeah, as you said, this is very sad. We're talking about like the schoolgirls, like in high school, even like the primary school, we had those attacks. As I said, those brave, even kids, high school students, they chose to not back down and piling up pressure on the regime. I think that's the main reason. But if you look at the whole scenario, that's so ridiculous as well. Okay, they say that, like, first of all, we have like this 13,000 students, over 13,000 students that have fallen ill due to these toxic gas attacks. So, and like over 300 schools, like nearly all provinces in Iran. So this shows that it is really coordinated and highly organized attack. But what they do in this scenario, they say that, okay, like, first of all, that's why I'm saying like a silly joke. They say, okay, first of all, they cover up the gravity, and they said, okay, like they have like very contradictory narratives, there's stress, enemy conspiracy, and things like that. But we have this, even like when these hospitals go to, like when these students go to hospital, they're prevented from this medical care. I don't know what's the word for it. I mean, we can't really put it in a word, I think. So, and then, even like some toxicology test has been done for some of these students. So, but they stopped from publishing it. These victims, like distressed family, come out like peacefully, they want to protest. What they do, what they face, just violently, just like attacking them. And then this is what is happening. And the last part I wanted just to mention, sorry, I'm a bit quick because, as you said, I'm short in time. The last part, they said, okay, we just like arrested these people, suspect, and then allegedly, involvement, in these, attacks. But when you go and look at those people, you find like journalists among them. So that, in the first place, that they basically reported all about this like gas attacks. So this is what makes it really horrible, I think. Yeah.
I appreciate the piece you've written, and I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nima.
Thanks, Ian.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dr. Nima Taefeshokhr joining us from Ottawa today. And that is full time for Roqe for today. Remember, for all things Roqe related, head to our website, roqemedia.com, where you can quite literally see all of our episodes, our entire back catalog, all of the guests we've had on the show, all of the different Roqe Media programming, the funnies, the videos, the moments. It's all there. Thanks to the amazing team who put this show together. The Roqe Media team, talented Anahita, Super Parisa, Smart Pegah, Savvy Roham, Bearded Omid. Thank you to all the people who support us and our sponsors. Thank you to all of you out there for supporting us and sharing our content. Please subscribe if you've not done so already, and become a Roqe member on our Patreon page. Find me on Instagram at jianghomeshi. Mizun Bashi.